Chapter 27:16. While they were talking, the clone of Xiaoyao, son of heaven, strode over. He raised the ruler in his hand high and swung it in the direction of Yanran. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to use the power of the holy mortal body. However, he glanced in a certain direction. The power of the sacred mortal body that he had activated disappeared without a trace. It was replaced by the divine nine-dragon cauldron. It turned into a residual shadow and rushed forward, colliding with the nine-colored ruler's shadow across the sky. The nine-colored ruler's shadow trembled on the spot, but it only weakened. The divine nine-dragon cauldron was cut back by the ruler. Future incarnation! Su Yu shouted in a low voice as he summoned the future incarnation. They each held a cauldron and attacked the remaining nine-colored ruler's shadow together. In this way, the ruler's shadow was finally deflected. It brushed past the edge of Nanming City. After the first attack failed, the clone of Emperor Xiaoyao launched another attack. It was different from the last time. This attack contained the blood of the emperor, which increased its power to the level of the master of the heavenly law. Su Yu's expression remained unchanged. He quickly performed seals with both hands and shouted, "One thought becomes real." Boom! A ruler also appeared in his hand, and he attacked against the sky. Suddenly, a giant ruler's shadow collided with Xiaoyao, son of heaven's shadow in the air. The result was, of course, an illusory ruler's shadow, which was far less powerful than the real ruler's. After the two of them collided, Su Yu and his future incarnation were forced to retreat frantically, and they narrowly escaped a fatal blow. With no other choice, they each took out a giant gate. One was black, and the other was white. It was the gate that sealed the nine netherworld. When the two collided, a magnificent and incomparably vast nine netherworld appeared in front of them. There was a loud boom. The nine netherworlds suddenly fell, suppressing the clone of Xiaoyao, son of heaven. As if sensing danger, the clone gave up on its target. Instead, it forcibly blasted open the nine netherworld and immediately escaped. Su Yu and the future clone were panting, as if they could not hold on for long. In a very distant place, Zhang Fian stared at the scene in the distance with a special ability. Her eyes were filled with joy. It seems that the rumor about his oil lamp running out is true. Otherwise, he would have displayed the holy mortal body long ago. If you are smart, you'd better not come to the heavenly court. If not, I'm afraid the divine nine-dragon cauldron will have to stay. After saying that, he quietly left. Little did he know that his every move was being watched by Su Yu. "You're still haunting me," Su Yu said calmly. The slightly difficult battle just now was obviously for Zhang Fian to see. It was best not to let them know that the sacred mortal body could be activated. Back in the courtyard, Qin Xian'er came over to support him. "Let me handle the battles from now on." Su Yu stroked her head. "How could I bear to let you take such a risk? In any case, I'm already a new ancient god of the nine nether," Qin Xian'er muttered. Su Yu's gaze became slightly gloomy. "You can only count as half. In these 10 years, with the help of first, Feng Ling, and multi-purpose, Qin Xian'er successfully absorbed 3 portions of the ancient god of the nine nether's legacy. The 4th portion had already been secretly used by the holy demon. In addition, he was already dead, and the legacy he left behind had completely dissipated. As a result, Qin Xian'er's inheritance was incomplete. Even so, he's still an early-stage Heaven's Tao Lord, which is equivalent to a ruler. Qin Xian'er waved the divine flames of 9 underworlds in her hand. Su Yu could not help but laugh and pinched her face. "You're too lucky." She had become the Heaven's Law Master without doing anything. Su Yu wasn't even a Path Master. "No matter how lucky I am, I'm not as good as my husband," Qin Xian'er said, blushing. After a pause, Qin Xian'er looked at Su Yu and said, "Why don't you absorb the bloodline of the Time Master? Anyway, the Star Rain Empress doesn't want it anymore." "Me?" Su Yu turned his palm over, and the bloodline of the Time Master appeared in front of him. He had absorbed the bloodline of the waning Moon Empress before. If he absorbed the bloodline of all the descendants in front of him, he would most likely be able to reach the Yuan level in the domain of time. As long as the Time Master is alive, don't touch his things. Su Yu put it away cautiously. The Time Master was astute, and it was best to be cautious. Su Yu pondered for a long time. His figure moved, and the future incarnation appeared. In the days that I'm gone, you will repair the Nightmare Crossing Lotus. Su Yu took out the broken Nightmare Crossing Lotus. The future incarnation was connected to his mind, so it understood the significance of the Nightmare Crossing Lotus. 10 years later, it would be the end of the era. At that time, they would need a complete grievance crossing Lotus Throne to protect them through the great calamity of Doomsday. Xian'er, please do me a favor, Su Yu said. Husband, please tell me. Qin Xian'er had long wanted to do something for Su Yu. Su Yu said, please return to the outer region and consolidate the forces I left behind in the outer region. Qin Xian'er nodded without hesitation. In the outer realm, Su Yu had founded an organization called the Tripod. His old friends from the Zhenlong continent, the Jiuzhou continent, the God territory, and the Absolute Beginning realm were all integrated into the Cauldron. The outer realms might not be able to avoid this great calamity. Therefore, they had to be integrated in time. Coincidentally, I want to see my father, Qin Xian'er said emotionally. She once had similar thoughts, but she was always drifting outside, unable to control herself. Now, he finally had the chance to go back and see his father. 200 years have passed. I wonder how he is now. Arrange everything. Su Yu stepped out of the southern part of the dream-broken realm alone and headed for the space area. If one were to say that the time domain's restraints were like an hourglass, then the time domain's restraints were like an hourglass. But when he entered the space domain, the restriction was on his feet. Each person's body was shackled by a faintly discernible chain. With just a thought from the Space Master, the chain would tighten, making it impossible for people to move. The only way to break the chain was to inject the space crystal. And the source of the space crystal was to exchange for the gold Xian fragment. This method was exactly the same as the time area. The difference was, the time area occupied the former territory of the ancient god of Jiu, so one had to dig up the Jiu crystal to exchange for the time crystal. The space area occupied the former territory of the ancient god of Jin Xian, so one had to dig up the fragments left behind by the ancient god of Jin Xian's self-destruction. He stepped into the space area. Su Yu's feet were also entangled by the chain. He looked at it calmly, took a step forward, and broke free of the chain. He was about to enter one of the cities to look for a map. He heard a word that he could not ignore. What a chaotic world! The Space Master is about to die, and the Corpse Clan took the opportunity to come out. I heard that they have already occupied 1/10 of the space area. Yes, I heard that they broke into the explosion site of the ancient god of Jin Xian and transformed many powerful Corpse Clan members. Corpse Clan? Su Yu remembered that the Holy Demon once led the Pearl Female Corpse and other Corpse Clan members. However, after the Holy Demon appeared, the Corpse Clan disappeared without a trace. Surprised to hear that they had appeared in the space area, Su Yu could not help but be tempted. Could it be the Pearl Female Corpse? The Female Corpse King who was still obsessed with avenging him after 100 years? Chapter 27:17. With a thought, he used the Soul Realm to examine the other party's memory. Space Domain Luohan Slope? Luohan Slope was the most deserted place in the space domain. It was said that it was the place where ancient god Jin Xian self-destructed before he died. His ancient god body exploded into countless fragments, splashing to every corner of the space domain. Even a small part of the time domain was scattered. Outside the time domain, in the cemetery of the Seven-Star Civilization, there was a fragment of ancient god Jin Xian. It was probably the place where the explosion had splashed down. The fragment of ancient god Jin Xian had indeed bred a very powerful evil spirit. The corpse clan had occupied that place for a reason. With a thought, Suyu flew into the sky. At that time, at the center of the space domain, in an empty half-real world, the transparent future incarnation of the Time Master was trying to stop his body from dissipating. "You can't do it anymore." Beside him stood an old woman whose body was decaying. She looked regretful. The future incarnation sighed. "You're almost there too." The woman was the Space Master. Her life was coming to an end. "You will. I still have hope." The woman had a sly look on her face. The Time Master's face flashed with anger. "You can't blame me for failing to complete the Emperor's task. The descendant of ancient god Jiulong has appeared. Without Su Yu's help, the defense formation outside the time domain would have collapsed completely. It would not have been like now, where most of the defense formations were just cracked without any signs of breaking. The southern area of the Dream-Broken Realm did not even crack. It was far from meeting the Emperor's requirements. Only by completing the task would the Emperor recreate their lives when the era restarted, so that they could continue to rule the world in the next era. The Space Master said sympathetically, "It's not entirely your fault. The most dangerous foreign domain is outside your time domain." The most dangerous foreign domain she mentioned was naturally the place where Su Yu was born. There was a part of ancient god Jiulong's divine realm. It was the divine realm that gave birth to Su Yu. "However, you don't have to worry too much. If my task is completed, I can help you destroy the defense formation in the time domain." The Space Master was very confident. The Time Sovereign raised her head and revealed a hint of gratitude. "I really envy you. You have such good natural conditions. You don't have to spend so much effort to set things up like me." "Heh, let's just wait and see." The Space Dominus sat down cross-legged, and his body clearly flicked his sleeves a little more. At that time, Fallen Soul Slope, Su Yu stood on an ancient tree and looked down at the black mass of zombies. He could not help but stare. The sheer number was beyond imagination. Perhaps all the people in the entire 1/10 of the region would be transformed into the corpse race. However, what was very suspicious was that the Space Dominus was completely unmoved by this. Is it because he's about to die, so he doesn't have the strength to do so? Or is he plotting something else? Su Yu pondered. At this moment, a shrill cry came from the sky. Looking up, he saw a flock of phoenixes. The phoenix of the ancient god realm of Jiyo? Su Yu was surprised. Those phoenixes were also from the Corpse Clan. The phoenixes swooped down, and the corpse race on the ground made way, revealing an incomparably wide and huge underground cave. It was filled with dense energy and was the favorite place of the Corpse Clan. Su Yu's heart stirred slightly. He folded his personal space into dust and slowly drifted into it. As soon as he entered, he was shocked. He actually sensed many powerful and unusual breaths, each of which was no less than the level of a ruler. He fixed his eyes on them. In the underground central square stood 10 powerful skeletons. Each skeleton had the strength of a heavenly law master. However, their intelligence was very low. At this moment, they were like tamed hounds, obediently staying where they were without moving. In the middle of the square, there were 2 people sitting side by side. And Su Yu actually knew all of them. The one on the left was a handsome young man with a jade-like face. The most special thing about him was that he had a pair of azure blue eyes. Yu Xiangwan. Su Yu recognized him at first glance and could not help but be surprised. Back then, they had an accident when they took the time tunnel from Beiming City. The 2 of them parted because of this. After that, they never saw each other again. Unexpectedly, now that they met again, it turned out to be here. His current identity was already very different. Beside him sat a middle-aged woman in a golden robe with a graceful posture. Only her eyes were too sharp. They were like 2 sharp knives that could ruthlessly cut through anyone they laid their eyes on. This person was none other than the Phoenix King. At this moment, a few phoenixes flew down and turned into human figures. Greetings, Corpse Emperor, Phoenix King, the execution platform has been prepared. The Phoenixes reported. The Phoenix King said calmly, since everything is ready, let's begin? Corpse Emperor, do you have any objections? Yu Xiangwan's face was solemn. He said in a low voice, our Corpse clan has just gathered, and our power is still too weak. If we can unite, we should unite as much as possible. There is no need to be ruthless. The Phoenix King said lightly, Corpse Emperor, you are too kind. This is not the style of the descendants of the Corpse ancestor ancient god. Yu Xiangwan was silent. She clenched her fists secretly. That day, the accident in the time tunnel had sent him to the space domain in one go. Knowing that it would be difficult for him to return in a short time, Yu Xiangwan simply developed in secret. He was very lucky to find the ruins of the explosion of the ancient god Jin Xian and used those fragments to create many powerful Corpse clan. He was ready to return to the time domain after accumulating enough power. But 10 years ago, the Corpse clan phoenixes of the ancient god Jiu Yu arrived and took over the Corpse clan army he had created. This was because this Phoenix King had the sacred artifact of the Corpse ancestor ancient god. All the Corpse clan members would uncontrollably submit to the sacred artifact. Including him. Everything he had created was instantly stripped away. The Phoenix King glanced at the silent Yu Xiangwan and lectured, don't blame me for suppressing you. Ancient God Corpse ancestor left the sacred artifact to Ancient God Nine Nether because he knew that his bloodline descendants might not be of much use and needed someone to assist them. As it turned out, before Ancient God Nine Dragon disappeared, he had taught Ancient God Nine Nether a portion of how to use the Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron. It was the same for Ancient God Corpse ancestor. But what he handed over was an even more important sacred artifact. It was precisely for this reason that the Corpse race Phoenix had strangely appeared in Ancient God Nine Nether's god domain. But perhaps Ancient God Corpse ancestor had good intentions. However, it was destroyed by the Corpse race's Phoenix with bad intentions. This was the first time King Phoenix met Yu Xiangwan. Although he knew Yu Xiangwan's identity, he did not mention anything about the sacred relic. It wasn't until it saw the light of day again and left the Netherworld realm that it was finally activated. That was why he came looking for Yu Xiangwan with the holy artifact. However, she did not want to hand it over to it. Instead, she wanted to plunder everything that Yu Xiang had worked so hard to create. Phoenix King is right, Yu Xiangwan said without a change in expression. The Phoenix King slowly nodded. Then, do you have any objections to executing those disobedient Corpse clan members? Chapter 27:18. Very good. Then let's execute. The woman named Phoenix escorted several suppressed corpses from the depths of the ground. One of them was actually the Pearl Corpse King. She stared at Phoenix King with hatred. You ruin my plans. Ever since Yu Xiangwan appeared as a descendant of the ancient God Corp, all the corpses in the world took the initiative to gather around him. As his forces grew stronger and stronger, it was possible for him to rise again. However, Phoenix King suddenly appeared and asked to erase the consciousness of all corpses except the Phoenix clan and Yu Xiangwan. He trained them into puppets that would only obey orders like those 10 skeletons. The Pearl Corpse King naturally resisted with all his might. One could imagine what would happen to him. Now Phoenix King planned to use them to deter the rest of the corpses who wanted to resist. Your plan is to listen to my orders, Phoenix King said indifferently. The Pearl Corpse King's face was filled with hatred. She still had a last wish to fulfill. How could she erase her consciousness? Take him out. Phoenix King waved his hand. A group of people pressed the Pearl Corpse King out of the cave and came to the top. There, a pool had already been prepared. What rose inside was incomparably strong boundless karma flame. That was the most powerful restraining object for evil beings in the world. If the corpses were thrown in, the consequences could be imagined. Throw it down, the executive officer said coldly. A corpse was thrown down. Suddenly, his body was ignited by the boundless karma flame, and his entire body made a crackling burning sound. The sharp pain that penetrated into the soul caused the corpse to let out an extremely tragic scream. On the ground, the endless corpse race, as long as they were conscious, were all extremely afraid. For a while, after experiencing the excruciating pain that was worse than death, the corpse race completely died. Next, another corpse race was thrown down. An extremely painful scream broke out again, seeing the corpse race suffering extreme pain. Finally, it was the Pearl Corpse King's turn. Her eyes turned slightly, and when she was thrown down, she opened her mouth and spat. A black ball was spat out and exploded on the spot. Black demonic energy soared into the sky and wrapped around her. Then, at an astonishing speed, she tore through space and escaped into the distance. This ball was a life-saving item given to her by the holy demon. It contained the escape method of the heavenly law master. She had been hiding it all along, waiting for this moment. However, before he could leave, a bony claw descended from the sky as if it was prepared. Bang! With a loud bang, the Pearl Corpse King was slapped down from the sky. The black mist on his body dissipated. The enormous bone claw pressed him to the ground, making him unable to move. The Pearl Corpse King's heart sank as he looked up. It was one of the 10 skeletons. A golden-robed woman stood on its head with her hands behind her back. It was none other than the Phoenix King. A cold expression appeared on the Phoenix King's face. "Do you think you can hide this little trick from me? If the Pearl Corpse King were to escape in front of everyone, that would be the biggest joke in the world. The corpse race with consciousness would only learn from them and betray them." The Pearl Corpse King's heart was filled with despair. "You deserve to die," the Phoenix King said calmly. "I won't die. The one who will die is you. Oh no, I should call you the ruins of returning." The corpse race was a race that had died once and resurrected. They did not have the ability to resurrect a second time. If he died again, he would return to the void. "Throw him down!" the Phoenix King shouted. The Bone Claw immediately threw the Pearl Corpse King into the pool. However, at this moment, a divine 9-dragon cauldron appeared without warning and caught the Pearl Corpse King in one hand. Then, the divine cauldron spun around and fell back into Su Yu's hands. The sudden change made the Phoenix King's face change slightly. She looked up and found that it was Su Yu. She could not help but show a murderous expression. "It's you." How could she forget Su Yu, who came to the 9 netherworld with Yu Xiangwan that day? She would never forget that it was Su Yu who framed her and the 9 nether demon to fight, causing the Phoenix bloodline to suffer heavy casualties? Su Yu ignored her. Instead, he stepped into the space, and millions of galaxies appeared under his feet as he crossed the sky. The Phoenix King snorted coldly. "You want to leave?" The skeleton at the level of the Master of the Heavenly Law slapped down with its palm. This palm carried the pressure of the Master of the Heavenly Law, making it impossible to avoid. Su Yu's expression was as usual. A ruler appeared in his hand and swept across the sky. There was a loud bang. The moment the bone claw was blocked, the ruler shattered. But during this time, Su Yu had already activated the space domain to escape. The Phoenix King's face was full of murderous intent. He transformed into a giant phoenix and chased with all his might. But not long after he left, another Su Yu appeared out of thin air under the ground. He stepped forward to seize Yu Xiangwan and said, "Go." When the Phoenix King received the notice that the Corpse Emperor had been taken away, it was too late. Su Yu's future incarnation had fled to unknown places with Yu Xiangwan. Whoosh! The Phoenix King hurriedly returned and flew into a rage. "We have been tricked. Damn it!" Not only did he fail to kill the Pearl Corpse King, but he also let Yu Xiangwan escape from his control. He was the real descendant of the Corpse ancestor ancient god. All the Corpse clan was on his side. With him, even if he did not use the divine artifact, he could still control the Emperor. But now, he had to spend a lot of energy to activate the divine artifact. It was extremely troublesome. Go out and find the successor of the ancient god Jiolong immediately. The Phoenix King's expression was uncertain. After giving the order, she jumped into the underground world again. With a grasp of her palm, 10 palm-sized fragments of the ancient god of gold appeared in her palm. "Find a suitable skeleton immediately," she said in a low voice. She could not delay any longer. She had to prepare sufficient strength before the Space Master passed away. Only then could she occupy the space domain and build it into a fortress to resist the destruction of the era. At that time, in an area far away from the Luohun slope, two Suyu met. The future incarnation dispersed, leaving only the original body. Yu Xiangwan rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "Suyu." He was surprised and delighted. How could it be you? He thought it was some expert, but it turned out to be his old friend Suyu. Who else could it be? Suyu smiled faintly. As Yu Xiangwan of the Corpse Clan, there should not be many people who would be willing to save him. Yu Xiangwan could not calm down and said incoherently, "Brother Su, I will never forget the great kindness of saving my life." Suyu patted him on the shoulder. "There is no need to talk about this between you and me." When he calmed down, Yu Xiangwan's eyes were full of regret. "But that bitch got lucky. She snatched my ancestor's divine artifact and seized everything I created. If I didn't still have some value, that bitch would have killed me long ago." There was a hint of playfulness in Su Yu's eyes. "I feel that leaving the Corpse Clan aside is a blessing and not a curse for you," Su Yu said meaningfully. Yu Xiangwan smiled bitterly. "You're still making sarcastic remarks at a time like this?" He was really in a bad mood because of jealousy. It was really not the time to make fun of her. Su Yu's eyes were indifferent. "Who's making sarcastic remarks? I'm serious." Hearing that, Yu Xiangwan became solemn. But he could not understand what Su Yu meant. Chapter 27:19. Why do you think the Space Master allowed you to develop the Corpse Clan? Su Yu asked. Yu Xiangwan paused for a moment and said hesitantly, "I think they haven't discovered it yet?" Su Yu shook his head. "He is the chief sovereign of space. He is everywhere." Su Yu said, "She can overlook the entire space area at any time. How could she not notice your existence?" As a space domain expert, Su Yu understood the Space Master the best. The Space Dominus immediately discovered the existence of the corpse race. "If you found out, why didn't you stop them?" Yu Xiangwan was puzzled. No one welcomed the corpse race. The spatial domain was no exception. That's where the problem lies. Su Yu's eyes shone. "I think the Space Master must be plotting something. That Phoenix King taking over your corpse race is actually a good thing for you. If he really wanted to make a move, he would have found a way to deal with the Phoenix King just now. By keeping him here, he would be giving Xiangwan a chance to escape without batting an eyelid." Under Su Yu's guidance, Yu Xiangwan felt that there was a conspiracy behind all this. "Forget it, I'll just take it as spending money to get rid of the disaster." Yu Xiangwan puffed a sigh. Then, a smile appeared on his face. "I've heard of your achievements. I can't help but admire you." The small fry of the past had now become a heaven master who ruled over time. "It was just luck," Su Yu replied modestly. Yu Xiangwan laughed and patted his shoulder. "Come, let's find a place to talk." "Wait, I still have another matter." Su Yu took out the divine nine-dragon cauldron. The divine cauldron enlarged and poured out the pearl female corpse. Her reflexes were exceptionally quick. Rolling on the spot, Zhang Xian immediately widened the distance between them before looking at the newcomer. When he realized that it was Su Yu, he was dumbfounded. "Su Yu?" Her face was filled with shock and disbelief. "You're still alive?" For 100 years, she had always thought that Su Yu had been killed by the sinful woman. It was precisely this will that allowed them to grow from a tiny civilization in the subjugation crusade to an 8-star civilization today. Su Yu's sudden appearance was like a bolt from the blue to her. You've worked hard all these years, Suyu said emotionally. The pearl female corpse's eyes became misty as she happily threw herself into Suyu's embrace. Yu Xiangwan was stunned for a moment. The two of them knew each other? And their relationship seemed to be very deep? He finally understood why Suyu had never hated his identity as a member of the corpse clan. It turned out that he and the corpse race had long been fated. He tactfully turned around, feeling a little awkward. Suyu patted his back lightly and said, "Thank you for all these years." Puff, a dull sound was heard without any warning. When Suyu lowered his head to take a look, he saw that the pearl female corpse was holding a dagger, which she had thrust into his chest. Whoosh, the pearl corpse quickly retreated, her face filled with killing intent. "Zhuji, do you hate me?" Suyu was confused. Could it be that she hated him because she hadn't acknowledged him for so many years? The pearl female corpse sneered coldly. "You think you can fool me with this little trick? Cheat?" Suyu did not understand. The pearl female corpse said coldly, "All these years, there have been at least 90 people who have disguised themselves as Suyu and tried to deceive me." She looked Suyu up and down, then shook her head and said, "Although your disguise is quite good, you are still not the Suyu I know." 100 years passed. Both Suyu's appearance and temperament had changed. However, the pearl female corpse's memory of Suyu was fixed at 100 years ago, before Suyu's death. "It's really me," Suyu said hurriedly. The pearl female corpse looked at Suyu, her eyes hollow and angry. "Can you please stop using Suyu for entertainment? Isn't it better to let him sleep peacefully?" She was almost roaring as she questioned Suyu. Then, she slowly retreated. "Don't chase after me, I won't do anything for you." She then turned and fled. Suyu stood at his original position, not giving chase. Yu Xiangwan said hurriedly, "Brother Su, if you really know each other, why don't you chase after her?" Suyu looked at the dagger in his chest and pulled it out. His injury had automatically healed. His expression was a little complicated as he murmured, "The me in her heart died 100 years ago. It would be useless to chase after her now." Perhaps it was not a bad thing for them to maintain such a relationship. If they really acknowledged each other, Suyu would not know how to deal with their relationship. However, Suyu was very concerned about who the pearl female corpse was referring to before she left. Was she referring to the people who had disguised themselves as Suyu to deceive the pearl female corpse? But how did those people know that he had a close relationship with the pearl female corpse? Speaking of the pearl female corpse, she had escaped all the way to safety. She looked behind her, puzzled. "Why didn't you chase after her? Did I misunderstand something?" The pearl female corpse pondered. In the past, those people who had impersonated Suyu had used the hero saving the beauty tactic many times. Some of the dangers were fake dangers that they could create. But some of the dangers were indeed real dangers. Every time she saw through them, those fake Suyu would chase after her relentlessly. But this time, they did not chase after her? She felt that something was amiss. Speaking of which, the Suyu this time is indeed a little different. The pearl female corpse thought to herself, "Should I go back and observe him?" At that moment, a giant ship cut through the air and suddenly appeared above her head. 2 words were clearly engraved on the body of the giant ship. Nirvana. The pearl female corpse's expression changed slightly when she saw the 2 words. She said angrily, as expected, "It's still you people." The person who had been chasing after her all this time was none other than Nirvana. She did not hesitate and immediately fled. But a mighty voice came from the ship. "Enough, you have been out for long enough." The voice contained a power that could restrain evil beings. The pearl female corpse shuddered and found it difficult to move. At the same time, a giant claw reached out from the ship and grabbed the pearl female corpse. "Where are you taking me?" The pearl female corpse struggled unwillingly. "I'm taking you to the place you should go and the person you should see," the voice said. Then, the pearl female corpse was taken away. The giant ship left immediately, leaving no trace behind. Somewhere, Suyu seemed to sense something. He looked in the direction the giant ship had left and frowned. Xing Yuanxin? For a moment, the half-heart-shaped communication device in his hand actually reacted. But it quickly disappeared as though it was an illusion. Brother Su, what are your plans now? Yu Xiangwan asked. Suyu came back to his senses and looked toward the center of the space area. I'm looking for the Time Master. You want to go to the Space Divine City? Yu Xiangwan said. According to what I know, the Divine City has been sealed. It will be very difficult for you to sneak in. In other words, he could only force his way in. Sealed? Suyu was not surprised. Let's go there first. Suyu used the space area and hurried along with Yu Xiangwan. A few days later, outside the Space Divine City, Suyu and Yu Xiangwan arrived. A folded space lotus shrouded the entire Divine City. The people inside couldn't come out, and the people outside couldn't come in either. Suyu tried to break the seal with a bit of the power of the holy mortal body. However, it was rebounded by the space lotus. Unless he used all his strength, he couldn't break it. The Space Master was too cautious. He knew that his death was near, so he protected the Divine City before he died? Yu Xiangwan guessed. Suyu's eyes narrowed. Even if it was to protect the city, there was no need to set up such a huge formation so early. As he was thinking, the space defense in front of him suddenly fluctuated violently. A pillar of light visible to the naked eye shot up from the center of the Divine City and reached the end of the clouds. The sky turned gray and the earth became bleak. Countless creatures were mourning in silence. That was the death of the Space Master. The Space Master is dead? Yu Xiangwan was dumbfounded. Suyu said, "It's about time." He had heard from Yanran that the Space Master was about to die. Now was the right time. Yu Xiangwan's expression was solemn. We'd better hide. The Phoenix King is very ambitious. 10 years ago, she was planning to seize the space domain. Now that the Space Master is dead, it's the best time for her to act. Is that so? Suyu's eyes flickered slightly. Well, let's hide in the Divine City first. He took a deep breath, and his fist was densely packed with the power of the holy mortal body. He punched out fiercely. Now that the Space Master was dead, there was nothing to fear. A crack appeared in the space defense on the spot. Suyu and Yu Xiangwan immediately went in. As soon as they stepped in, they found the Divine City in chaos. There were hidden zombies everywhere, pouncing out premeditatedly, biting anyone they saw. They were transforming the nearby creatures at a very fast speed. Yu Xiangwan said in a low voice, "Sure enough. The Divine City had long been infiltrated by the Phoenix King. The corpse race was wreaking havoc everywhere." "You find a place to hide, I'll go," Suyu said. Yu Xiangwan nodded. "Do your thing with peace of mind. The zombies can't hurt me." At this time, a zombie found Yu Xiangwan and rushed over with a roar. Yu Xiangwan snorted softly, and the zombie screamed in fear, then knelt in front of her, not daring to get up. Seeing this, Suyu was finally relieved and immediately left. He stood outside the half-real world of the Space Master. "Time Master!" Suyu's hatred erupted. Xie Xiaoye's death was a self-blame that he could never forget. The instigator, the Time Master, must pay the price. Swoosh! His whole body burst into a 9-colored light, like a sharp arrow, directly piercing through the half-real world and landing in it. Inside the half-real world, there were folded spaces everywhere. The place where Suyu was a desert. However, in fact, this was just a space world in a grain of dust. Suddenly, the sky and the earth darkened, and an old face appeared. It was the Time Master. He stared at Suyu quietly outside the dust, his eyes calm. "I've been waiting for this day for a long time. I was really afraid you wouldn't come." He did not care at all that Suyu had woken up. He did not care about Suyu's revenge. Instead, he was confident. "Is that so?" Suyu's eyes burst with cold light. His figure was like a rainbow, penetrating the dusty space world. But what came into view was an even larger spatial world. As for the Time Master, he was in the outermost space. If you have the ability, find me. In the space, the words of the Time Master echoed. Chapter 27:20. Whoosh, Suyu turned into a rainbow and flew away, breaking through the space in front of him. But what came into view was an even larger space. When it broke open again, an even larger space appeared in front of them. And so on. No matter how many layers of space Suyu broke through, an even larger space appeared in front of him, and it would never end. Suyu stopped. This should be the power of the space half-truth world. If he didn't leave completely, he would stay here forever. He calmed his heart and pondered. At this moment, he was like an ant at the bottom of a bottle, circling around the bottom of the bottle. There was no way to leave like this. However, how could it be so easy to leave the half-truth world that the space dominus had personally set up? What's wrong? Holy mortal body, why aren't you chasing after him? The Time Sovereign's mocking voice rang out. Have you forgotten how your daughter fell into my hands? Have you forgotten how that person called Xie Xiaoye died in my hands? Suyu's emotions fluctuated, and his mind was filled with intense hatred. But he quickly calmed down. This was the Time Sovereign's deliberate mockery, interrupting his train of thought. Aren't you very powerful? Bring it on. The Time Dominus roared. Suyu was indifferent. With a stroke of his finger, he drew a space barrier that isolated all sounds from the outside world. He sat cross-legged and thought of a solution. Ha ha, coward! The Time Dominus said angrily. The more he behaved this way, the more it proved that Suyu's calmness was correct. If one blindly broke through space, they would never find the Time Dominator. Roar, seeing that goading was useless, the Time Dominus could only make other arrangements. In the space where Suyu was, a group of ferocious beasts that were hunting for food was suddenly transported over. It was easy to imagine how they would feel when they saw a living person like Suyu here. The Time Master was determined to stop Suyu from thinking. When the wild beasts attacked, the space barrier that Suyu had drawn up was like a thin piece of paper in the eyes of the wild beasts that had grown up in the half-real world. It was easily torn apart by the wild beasts, which then attacked Suyu. Suyu raised his finger, and a time realm swept out, instantly turning them into dust. However, just as one group of wild beasts was killed, another group of wild beasts was diverted from other places, and they attacked Suyu crazily. Moreover, there was an endless stream of wild beasts attacking in the later stages. Suyu was extremely annoyed. He took out the Divine Nine Dragons Cauldron and placed himself inside. The wild beasts attacked randomly, but they could do nothing to the Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron. Only then did Suyu get some peace and quiet to think. How could he get out of this vicious cycle? He was deep in thought. After a long while, his mind shook slightly. Destruction and construction. Of course, he was still unable to break through the semi-real world. However, it wasn't too difficult to re-enter after leaving. Understanding this, he pointed his finger, and the Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron rotated rapidly, sending all the wild beasts outside flying. Stepping on the Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron, Huang Xiaolong went back the way he came. At this moment, the wild beasts behind him stopped attacking. The Time Sovereign fell silent as well. It was as if he was waiting for Suyu to do so. Suspicion flickered in Suyu's heart. Could it be that he had guessed wrong? But he quickly made up his mind. Once he made a decision, he would not be influenced by others. Schwa, he quickly left a dimension. The Time Sovereign didn't stop him at all. He even deliberately opened up the space to let Suyu leave easily. All the signs showed that the Time Master longed for Suyu to leave. It was the same for the rest of the journey. Even if it meant returning to the final dust. The path to the outside world was also wide open, without any obstruction. No matter how determined a person was, it was impossible to remain calm and continue to believe in his own judgment. However, Su Yu was not a determined person, but a persistent person. He had always believed in his own judgment. Without hesitation, he rushed to the wide open road. However, as soon as he rushed over when he was about to reach the outside world, the road suddenly closed. Above the ninth heaven, the gloomy voice of the Time Master came. "Can't we sit down and have a good talk? Why do we have to fight to the death?" He was afraid. Because Su Yu's insistence was correct. Only by leaving the semi-real world first could he escape the cycle of repetition. Su Yu said indifferently, "What do you think?" With a clap of his hands, the divine nine-dragon cauldron turned into a broken line and attacked the closed road. With a bang, the dusty world shook violently. It was densely covered with cracks in all directions. The whole world couldn't withstand a few attacks from the divine nine-dragon cauldron. The Time Master's voice was even more gloomy. "If you stop now, I will give you something you want." "I only want your life," Su Yu said coldly. He rarely wanted to kill someone so desperately. The Time Master was one of them. "Don't you want Xie Xiaoye, who died for you, to come back to life?" the Time Master said in a tempting voice. Hearing this, Su Yu suddenly stopped. "Those who returned to the Void World could come back to life? You have been to the Void World once, so you should have been to the Void World, right?" The Time Master noticed the change in Su Yu and knew that she had grasped Su Yu's lifeline. How could Su Yu forget? In the Void World, Xie Xiaoye accompanied him to spend 10 years of lonely sleep. She also appeared as his wife. "Do you want to tell me where the people of the Void World can come back from?" Su Yu said coldly. The Time Master asked, "What do you think life is?" Too many people had asked this question. In the past, Lu Zhu had also asked Su Yu why people died. Lu Zhu was not completely satisfied with the answer given by Su Yu, because he had never explained the essence of life. "Life, in the final analysis, is a kind of energy," the Time Master said. The Time Sovereign said, "Just like how we can use our own power to casually create low-level life forms. We are nothing more than something created by a higher existence using energy," said Yang Qi. "However, we are created by a mysterious existence that controls the entire Great Beginning Realm. We can't touch or feel it." Su Yu stood in place. He understood something. Why did life go through the cycle of reincarnation? In this world, nothing with a form could last forever. Only energy always ran through the world, no more, no less, no more, no less, no less, immortal. The same is true for Xie Xiaoye's life. The Time Master's vision was naturally higher, so she saw more things and was more thorough. Her life dissipated in the Great Beginning Realm, but it may appear in another world in the form of energy. That world is the Void World you see. The creatures of the Void World exist in the form of energy, waiting for the next reincarnation to return to the Great Beginning Realm with a new life, a new identity, and a new consciousness. Was the Void World also a real world? Su Yu suddenly understood. No wonder the wild rabbits, wolves, and other wild beasts were all made of energy. The purpose of the Void World's existence is to temporarily store the energy of the Great Beginning Realm, refine this energy, wash away the memories of their previous lives, and finally put it back into the Great Beginning Realm. The two worlds are interdependent, and neither is dispensable. Chapter 27-21. As you said, that place will erase their memories. So what if I get my energy back? Su Yu asked coldly. Creatures with different consciousnesses were like two completely different people. It was like asking water. He could create a person who looked exactly like Wen Shui. However, it was no longer Wen Shui. It was another person. Then you need to go to the realm of returning ruins and get its energy back before its memory is erased. The Time Master smiled. I can't tell you how to go to the realm of returning ruins for the time being. This was the only way he could save his life. You stay here for 10 years. When I finish what I want to do, I will tell you how to go. The Time Master breathed a sigh of relief. He had finally stabilized the situation and grasped his life. Okay, Su Yu said calmly. The Time Master smiled slightly. That's right. A wise man submits to circumstances. Why do you have to be so emotional? Clang. Su Yu suddenly burst into colorful light and completely shattered the world of dust. After the world of dust was shattered, he should have appeared in the divine city and been transmitted to the outside world. However, this was not the case. What appeared around him was an extremely rich space world. On a throne, there was a dead old woman, rotten all over, exuding a faint stench. She was the Space Master. And near the throne, there was an old man sitting cross-legged. It was the Time Master who had escaped to this place. In front of him, there was a cube crystal. There were tens of thousands of small spaces inside it. As long as the crystal was gently rotated, the space inside would change. At this moment, a small hole was broken in one corner of the crystal. This was why Su Yu had never been able to come out. From the beginning of entering the half-real world, he fell into the space controlled by the crystal. For 10 years, the Time Master had been guarding against Su Yu's revenge. When she found out that he had really arrived, she immediately used the crystal to trap him in it. Fortunately, Su Yu discovered it in time. Otherwise, if he continued to go deeper, it would not be as easy to retreat as before. Time Master, Su Yu said coldly. The Time Master's hand trembled. She put down the crystal with a gloomy face and raised her old eyes to stare at Su Yu. Don't you want to save Xie Xiaoye? She is devoted to you. The Time Master's eyelids twitched slightly. Su Yu nodded. I do, but you won't tell me how to save it. He knew the Time Sovereign too well. A person who was full of hatred for him, a person who was good at scheming. Would she really tell him everything 10 years later? No. If he gave in now, he would only be falling into his trap for nothing. Think about it carefully. There aren't many people who can tell me the method to save you. The Time Sovereign stood up and threatened. Su Yu said indifferently, It's fine as long as you're not the only one who knows. I will find someone else. Shua, the 9-colored light on his body instantly shone brightly. The half-truth world was illuminated by colorful light. Forced into a dead end, the Time Dominus roared in anger. Human, must you insist on a life and death struggle? Good. I'll fulfill your wish. Future River of Time. Crash, a long river suddenly appeared and engulfed the entire half-truth world. The Time Ruler, who was already weak and pale, immediately solidified a bit, and her strength clearly increased. Su Yu, don't think that you are invincible just because you have the sacred body of a mortal. You will never be able to imagine the true power of my time realm. The Time Sovereign roared. The whole long river trembled violently. Future annihilation. The Time Ruler stepped on the long river of time. With a dull sound, Su Yu's future incarnation appeared, covered in blood. The ghastly wounds indicated that the future incarnation was on the verge of death. Be careful, he will launch fatal attacks on you in the future. Kill him quickly, the future incarnation said. In the long river below, a shocking wave suddenly appeared and engulfed the future incarnation. If a person's future was destroyed, when he reached that point in the future, he would naturally die. Don't you want to kill me? Then let's perish together. The Time Ruler roared. Su Yu's face was calm and he said lightly, Perish together? You are not qualified. Break. His figure turned into a long rainbow, and instantly passed through the body of the Time Ruler. The power of the sacred body of a mortal immediately turned into a scorching flame. It began to burn from the inside out. The Time Ruler immediately screamed. But in the raging fire, the old face was full of hatred and a hideous smile. I advise you to withdraw the power of the sacred body of a mortal immediately. Su Yu turned his back to him and said lightly, Why? The reason, hee. The Time Ruler sneered. If I die, my bloodline descendants will also die. I think you must have given all the bloodline descendants of the Time Ruler to that girl Xingyu, right? Hee, if you contact her now, you will find that her body is also beginning to burn. The Time Ruler and his descendants were connected by blood. He was under the destructive attack of the sacred body of a mortal, and so was his bloodline. He could imagine what would happen to those who obtained the bloodline of the Time Ruler. This was the last resort of the Time Ruler. He would not use it until the last moment. However, to his surprise, Su Yu did not panic at all. Instead, he took out the bloodline of the Time Ruler calmly. At this moment, the bloodline was burning. Su Yu pressed his palm lightly, and the burning power of the sacred body of a mortal was extinguished. Are you talking about this? Su Yu said lightly. The Time Ruler turned around, widened his old eyes, and said incredulously, You didn't give it to others, and you didn't absorb it yourself? How could this be? Who could resist the temptation of the bloodline of the Time Ruler? Moreover, this was the entire bloodline of his descendant. Once obtained, it would be a Yuan realm. 10 years had passed, and no one had refined it. Su Yu turned around and looked at him coldly. So, you can rest in peace. The flames on the Time Ruler's body suddenly soared. Amidst the pain, he let out an unwilling roar. No! No! I am the Time Ruler, the Eternal Ruler, I will not die, I will not die. In the roar, the Time Ruler was burned into a mass of nothingness. Only some crystal-clear crystals were left. Su Yu grabbed it with an indifferent look on his face. The essence of time. The most precious thing in the life of the Time Ruler, full of his lifelong understanding of the time domain. Whoosh! He waved his hand, and the future incarnation appeared. The incarnation was dying, and said weakly, If I had been a little later, I would have been finished. Su Yu shrugged his shoulders. Is the future me too weak? He touched it with his palm and healed its injury. The future incarnation was immediately full of vigor and said bitterly, You don't know, this old guy prepared an extremely powerful thing in the future. I am lucky to be alive. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. The Time Ruler repeatedly asked for another 10 years. Chapter 27-22. He looked around. Su Yu fixed his gaze on the dead Space Master. To be exact, it was the throne he was sitting on. He moved the Space Dominus corpse away. His body, which was already rotten beyond repair, immediately turned into dust and fell to the ground. The throne beneath him was revealed. Only now did he realize that there was a pitch-black sickle under the throne. That's it. The future incarnation revealed a look of wariness. Really? Su Yu picked up the scythe and imbued it with his mysterious Tao energy. After it was used, the black scythe drew a pitch-black arc in the air. But that was all. The power of the arc was comparable to that of an ordinary Tao artifact. It didn't seem all that powerful. However, how could this item be suppressed by the space dominator under his throne? Moreover, his future self had almost died under the scythe. There was no need to think about it to know how terrifying it was. No. When the Time Sovereign uses it, the scythe will change shape. It's not like this. The future incarnation shook its head. Su Yu pondered as he stared at the throne. After a moment of contemplation, he kicked the throne over. Sweeping his gaze over, he saw a line of words at the bottom of the throne. Scythe of Myriad Tribulations. That should be Black Sickle's name. What followed next was the specific method to use it. After reading it, Su Yu murmured, No wonder the power of the mysterious path doesn't work. It turns out that it requires the bloodline of the ruler. He glanced at the Time Sovereign's bloodline and said, Stand guard for me. The future incarnation had an expectant look on its face. It will naturally be much safer in your hands. Go ahead and refine it. Su Yu sat down cross-legged and began to integrate the bloodline of the Time Ruler with anticipation. As soon as the bloodline entered his body, Su Yu immediately absorbed the endless pure time realm from it. His domain continued to grow. 1 month later, his domain had finally broken through the intermediate level and reached the advanced level. Unfortunately, He had only absorbed 10% of the Sovereign Lord's blood. He calmed his heart. Su Yu continued. After October, the blood of the Time Sovereign faded away. Su Yu's body was surrounded by an unprecedentedly powerful time domain. Past incarnation. Whoosh, another Su Yu appeared. His cultivation was only at the Nirvana realm. That was him 10 years ago. Present body, past body, future body. All three bodies were present. At the same time, the time around Su Yu was changing at an alarming speed. Sometimes it sped up, sometimes it slowed down, and sometimes it froze. It was as if they obeyed Su Yu's commands at all times. Hourglass of time, he said softly. The time domain around him instantly expanded infinitely, enveloping the entire space. An hourglass suddenly appeared above the heads of all living beings. That was something that the beings in the time domain had once possessed, haunting them for generations, until the Time Sovereign perished. Now, it had reappeared above the heads of the beings in the spatial domain. What's going on? The beings of the space domain were all shocked. Fallen Soul Slope. The expression of the Phoenix King, who was sitting on a skeleton, darkened. The Time Ruler has been resurrected? Or is it the birth of a new ruler of time? The answer was naturally the latter. How troublesome. Phoenix King was slightly annoyed. She had been waiting for the space ruler to die before she dared to take over. As a result, right after the space dominus died, a new time dominus appeared. However, the situation is already over. So what if the Time Sovereign is born? It won't change the situation. Currently in the space domain, it had already been covered by the surging corpse race army. Most of the living beings had been transformed by the corpse race in just a year. Only a few were chased to the time domain and hid. Moreover, the corpse race army didn't stop. There were no two ways. They attacked the broken time domain and soul domain. No one had expected that the corpse race, which had been neglected, would become so powerful in the chaos. They had accomplished what the holy demon had wanted to do in the past. Come with me. We'll meet the new time ruler. Under the control of the Phoenix King, a total of 20 skeletons at the level of the Heaven Law charged toward the divine city. Swoosh, however, just as they were about to leave. A golden palanquin stopped the Phoenix King without any warning. The Phoenix King's expression froze. Without thinking, he used the skeleton of the Heaven Law to attack. However, the attack of the skeleton of the Heaven Law couldn't even break 3 feet of the golden sedan. There was a faint layer of ripples around the sedan that easily blocked the skeleton. Stupid corpse race, a young woman sighed from the golden sedan. As soon as she said that, the ripples suddenly rebounded. Instantly, the skeleton of the Heaven Law was smashed into dust. It didn't even have the power to resist. The strangest thing was that the Phoenix King was unscathed under such a fierce attack. The other party's control of power was extremely precise. A trace of cold sweat appeared on the Phoenix King's forehead. What kind of existence was in front of him? The Phoenix King braced himself and said, "Your Excellency, what can I do for you?" The other party didn't seem to have any obvious malice. Otherwise, she would have been dead after that attack. The person in the golden sedan said slowly, "You control the power of the corpse race, but your vision is limited to one domain. Your shallowness is beyond my imagination." Hearing that, the Phoenix King was moved. The corpse race only has a large number, but they don't have an advantage in actual combat power. How sad. You don't even understand the corpse race that you control. As soon as he said that, a very ordinary corpse race member flew into the air. The corpse race member struggled. Then, his body kept expanding and finally exploded. However, the power of an ordinary corpse race member's explosion was extremely terrifying. It wasn't inferior to the attack of a peak Earth Law Lord at all. The space was shattered, revealing the defensive array. Even the array had a crack. The Phoenix King took a deep breath. She had no idea that the self-destruction of these corpse race members could be so powerful. The space domain is the ancient god Jin Xian's god domain. After he self-destructed, the essence of his body was integrated into the land of the god domain. The person in the sedan continued, the corpse race born here has more or less absorbed some of the essence. If the essence had been used properly, how could it have self-destructed just now? The Phoenix King was excited. If that was the case, with these invincible corpse race members, the entire 8-star civilization would be shrouded in fear. Thank you for your guidance. May I know who you are? The Phoenix King was very curious about the other party's identity. Why would the other party help her? Someone who will help you. The person in the sedan hid his identity. After saying that, he said, there is one person you need to pay attention to. I suggest you get rid of him first. Who? Su Yu. He will be a great enemy that will hinder you. The Phoenix King's eyes became fierce. Even without the person in the sedan mentioning him, she had no intention of letting Su Yu go. I know. I will find this person. Chapter 27-23. The Phoenix King frowned, not understanding what he meant. Don't you know why Su Yu died once? The person in the sedan asked. The Phoenix King immediately understood. Su Yu's wife and children were his weakness. Su Yu was invincible in a face-to-face battle. But his wife and children were very weak. Back then, it was precisely because the Time Sovereign had controlled his daughter that he had been forced to dig out his own heart. Why not follow suit now? The Phoenix King's eyes lit up. That's right, this method might be more reliable. Thank you for your guidance. I know what to do now. The person in the palanquin smiled. Then, farewell. The golden palanquin immediately disappeared into thin air. The Phoenix King's expression sank. Who is this person? Does he have a grudge against Su Yu? She was not stupid. She understood that her opponent was using her to deal with Su Yu. He even wanted to use her to occupy the entire 8-star civilization. After pausing for a moment, she took out a scepter and said, "Let's go to the Divine City." There was no hurry to get rid of Su Yu. He had to occupy the space domain first. Hordes of corpse race clansmen charged towards the Divine City. At that time, in the half-true world, Su Yu slowly opened his eyes. His domain had reached the Yuan level as he wished, and he had cultivated his time domain to the extreme. Now he even had a very strange feeling. He could control the life and death of all living beings. As long as he was willing, he could deprive all living beings of their time at any time. The most amazing thing was, he felt a sense of detachment that he had never felt before. It was like jumping from the perspective of an ant to the perspective of a human. Moreover, he could faintly sense some hidden existences that he had never felt before. For example, the East. He felt an extremely powerful force that was not inferior to any of the other domains. That should be the heavenly court, right? Apart from that, he looked outside the defensive formation. He could vaguely sense an abyss-like existence. He didn't know what that place was. Yuan-level time realm. Su Yu clenched his fists and sighed. Time was the first thing he touched. After so many years, he was the first to reach Yuan realm. It could be considered a kind of fate. Suddenly, he received a message from Xiang Wan. When she opened it, it was full of Yu Xiang Wan's urging. Quick, come. I can't hold on any longer. Su Yu put away the message and left the half-real world immediately. Just as he retreated, an extremely powerful explosion erupted around him. Su Yu was caught off guard and was almost injured by the explosion. Fortunately, he activated his elemental domain and froze time. When Xiao Qin looked down, he saw a group of frozen corpse race cultivators charging over, lying in ambush. Except for one that had already self-detonated, the rest were all in the process of self-detonation. Su Yu was speechless. These corpses. He grabbed one that was about to explode and observed it carefully. He discovered that there was a strange energy flickering in their bodies. This is the aura of the ancient god Golden Mysteries fragment? Suyu recognized it and asked in surprise. After that, he checked another batch of corpse race, and they were all the same. It's no wonder that the explosion is so terrifying. It's igniting the essence of the ancient god gold mystery. Suyu suddenly understood. He lifted his eyes and looked over. The entire divine city was already densely packed with the corpse race. Only a small number of living beings relied on the formations of the pavilions to struggle at death's door. However, when encountering the corpse race that could self-destruct, these resistants were very helpless. He walked in time, looking for Yu Xiangwan. Finally, in a certain cavern world, he saw Yu Xiangwan and a group of people trying their best to resist the zombies. Suyu could not help but laugh. The leader of the corpse race was just a small fry resisting the corpse race? With a flick of his sleeve, Yu Xiangwan and a group of people were all taken away. It was not until he left the divine city that the time freeze was lifted. Boom! Boom! The entire divine city erupted with the sound of dense explosions. The once glorious divine city was instantly plunged into a sea of fire and blown into ruins. Suyu released a group of living beings. They were at a loss. If he remembered correctly, weren't they still resisting the corpse race? How did they end up in a safe place outside the city? Suyu said lightly, "Seek your own way out." Only then did they understand that they were indebted to Suyu for saving them. Thank you, Senior, for saving our lives." A group of people thanked him one after another and fled in the blink of an eye. Yu Xiangwan breathed a sigh of relief, but she was puzzled. What happened just now? Suyu had no time to explain and said, "Let's leave first. The space domain is too dangerous. I think the backup plan left by the Space Master may need to come true." Seeing the power of the corpse race's self-destruction, Suyu had already realized the purpose of the Space Master allowing Yu Xiangwan to cultivate the corpse race. However, just as they were about to leave, the people who had already fled rushed back one after another, their faces full of despair. "It's over, there's nowhere to run." A living being's eyes were full of bitterness. Suyu looked into the distance and saw a group of black zombies surrounding them like a black tide. Among them, the skeletons of 20 Heaven Law Masters were particularly conspicuous. On one of the skeletons stood a middle-aged woman in a golden dress. Phoenix King. When he sent his troops to the Divine City, he happened to encounter a few fish that had escaped the net. "Suyu, Yu Xiangwan, you are both here?" Phoenix King commanded the corpse race army to rush over. She was surprised to find that Suyu and Yu Xiangwan were surrounded and couldn't help but laugh. It was too unexpected. She thought that Suyu and Yu Xiangwan had escaped far away. In the end, they actually met here. Yu Xiangwan's face was as calm as still water. She said, "Phoenix King, enough is enough. The corpse race he created were all made of dead people. However, Phoenix King was different. He commanded the corpse race to commit all kinds of evil, transforming all the creatures in the entire region into the corpse race. He caused a devastating disaster to the creatures. You think you can teach me a lesson?" Phoenix King laughed coldly. "I advise you to come back to my side obediently. That way, you may be able to live a more dignified life. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." At most, he would kill Yu Xiangwan. Since he couldn't control this hidden danger, he could only destroy it. "That depends on your ability." Yu Xiangwan was not afraid. Her eyes were azure blue. Phoenix King didn't care. "You are just a fallen phoenix. Who do you think you can scare?" Seeing that Yu Xiangwan was unwilling to die, Phoenix King made up his mind. "Get rid of them, leave no one alive." Suddenly, a group of zombies surrounded them. Without exception, all of them chose to self-destruct. Suyu stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Freeze." As soon as he said that, the whole time fell into a frozen state. He brought a group of people with him and came in front of Phoenix King. This person could be killed or not. However, the corpse ancestor ancient divine artifact on her must be taken away. Just as Su Yu was about to take the scepter from her hand, suddenly, the black crystal on the scepter emitted a wave of fluctuation. Phoenix King, who was holding the scepter, forcibly broke free from the frozen time. When he found that Su Yu had snatched the scepter, he immediately took it back and retreated quickly. Chapter 27-24. If it had been any later, Su Yu would have succeeded. Humph! The Phoenix King suddenly let out a shrill, ear-piercing sound wave. The sound wave swept over and pushed Su Yu away. She held the scepter in her hand and smashed it, freezing the nearby space and shattering it. The zombies were freed and once again rushed over in a self-destructing manner. The Phoenix King retreated to the back, sitting steadily on the skeleton of the Master of the Heavenly Law, looking down from above. "Haha, human, accept your fate. You can't beat me." Su Yu was about to use time freeze again. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. The backup plan left by the space ruler had been activated. In the blink of an eye, Su Yu grabbed Xiang Wan and the other creatures and used the space domain and the Yuan level time domain to leave. How vast was the entire space domain? It would take at least a few months or even a few years to cross it. However, in just a few breaths, he had successfully escaped and arrived at the time domain. The Phoenix King sneered. "Mastering the time domain only has this much courage? You really look down on me." Without any hidden dangers, the Phoenix King led the zombies towards the Divine City. "The space domain is ours." The Phoenix King arrived in the city under the welcome of countless zombies. As soon as they entered, an unexpected scene appeared. The bodies of all the zombies seemed to have some kind of preset mechanism, and they began to burn at the same time. The Master of the Heavenly Law corpse under the feet of the Phoenix King was no exception. There was a loud rumbling sound. A member of the corpse race exploded uncontrollably in the raging flames. Then a second, a third, a fourth, even the skeleton of the Master of the Heavenly Law under the feet of the Phoenix King exploded. The power of the explosion of the Master of the Heavenly Law skeleton was unimaginable. The Phoenix King was blown to pieces on the spot. Only a golden soul was left, holding the scepter and fleeing. However, what made the Phoenix King shudder was that the zombies in the entire space domain began to explode wildly. Their souls had nowhere to escape. As the entire space domain shattered, they turned into dust. At the border of the time domain, Xiang Wan stared at the space domain in shock. In an instant, the space domain had completely sunk into nothingness. The so-called sinking of the divine land probably referred to what was happening right now. The most terrifying thing was, the defensive formation outside the space domain was completely blown up. At a glance, it was like a bottomless pit. This was because a portion of the corpse race had chased them all the way to the time domain. The area around Shiming City in the time domain had also sunk into oblivion because of the explosion of the corpse race. Su Yu said, "Brother Yu, you lead the people to deal with the time domain. I'll go there first." He once again activated his time and space domain, returning to the sky above the Divine City in an instant. Where was the shadow of the God City? There was only nothingness. Even the defensive array formation was nowhere to be seen. It had been completely destroyed. The space dominus destruction is really thorough. At this moment, the reason why the space dominus had allowed the corpse race to grow so rapidly had already surfaced. He would make use of their self-destruction to destroy the spatial domain and the outer realm's defensive formation. Now it seemed that she had been too successful. Su Yu sighed softly. Then, he searched carefully and finally found a black scepter floating quietly in the void. A trace of the Phoenix King's consciousness remained on it. "I didn't lose, I didn't." That wisp of consciousness wrapped around the scepter unwillingly. He refused to give up. "Rest in peace." Su Yu wiped his finger, completely erasing the remnant consciousness. He held the scepter and was about to return. A voice suddenly sounded in Su Yu's mind. The soul domain has also been affected. Can I go and have a look now? It was the soul dominus. Suyu had not forgotten his agreement with the soul dominus. He had received pointers from the soul dominus, and had been given a soul emperor robe. In return, Suyu had brought the soul dominus back to the soul domain. Now it was time to fulfill his promise. Okay. Suyu used the time and space domain, and stepped into the soul domain. He pondered. If the soul dominus was here, then who was in charge of the soul domain? The descendant of the master? As he pondered, he had reached the soul domain in a few breaths. As soon as he entered the soul domain, a moon appeared on his forehead. That was the soul domain's restraint on living creatures, the moon of souls. With just a thought from the master, the souls of the living creatures under his control would be completely destroyed in a short time. The place where they were was a void. It had been blown up by the corpse race. The smell of blood was everywhere, and waves of wailing lingered in their ears. Swoosh! Their arrival naturally attracted the attention of the border army. Go back! An early-stage road master, who was holding a doctrine artifact, berated in a stern voice. The current ruler of the soul domain had not perished yet. Therefore, the order had not collapsed yet. When they discovered the invasion of the corpse race, the border army reacted very quickly and immediately resisted the corpse race. Now that they suddenly noticed Suyu's arrival, they ordered him to go back. Suyu looked at them and said, I have fulfilled my promise, right? The original promise was to bring him back to the soul domain. He had never mentioned where he would go in the soul domain. Yes. The soul dominus gazed at the familiar hometown, his voice trembling slightly. However, if you can send me to see someone, maybe I can help you with something else. Suyu clicked his tongue and muttered, Why don't I find it strange? That favor, you must be very eager. Suyu said without hesitation, Tell me about it first. The soul dominus said, Don't you want to know how to save people from the world of returning ruins? Suyu's pupils shrank. A helpless smile flashed across his lips. I knew you were talking about this. Although the soul dominus rarely spoke, he had always been by Suyu's side. The time dominus knew almost all of his secret. Okay, I can take you there. Suyu paused. However, I want to ask you something. Is your goal also to destroy the soul domain and the defensive formation outside? So far, it seemed like the ultimate goal of the rulers was surprisingly the same. No. The soul dominus's tone became even more complicated. What right does an abandoned ruler have to participate in this? Suyu's eyes flickered slightly. What exactly did the rulers want to participate in? Each of them had exerted all their strength, determined to destroy the domain. Even in death, they were still persistent. Did you hear that? Step back. The general berated. Suyu smiled faintly and used the space domain to barge in. The general's expression changed slightly. He immediately crushed a communication talisman and said, A descendant of the space master has intruded. Master, please give me your orders. In a certain army tent in the soul domain, a young man was staring thoughtfully at the message. A fish that escaped the net? The so-called master was a young human. Chapter 27-25. Track down his whereabouts immediately. Once you find him, kill him on the spot, the young man ordered calmly. After a few breaths, in front of a cemetery, the cemetery was very old and extremely dilapidated. Many tombstones had collapsed and fallen into the swamp. From the looks of it, it should be a mortal graveyard. This is it, the soul god said. Suyu was surprised. He thought the soul god had come to seek revenge. He didn't expect it to be a cemetery. Crash. An old man's figure was formed. His aged eyes were filled with deep and complex emotions as he strode into the cemetery. Finally, he arrived in front of a grave with only half a tombstone left. The grave was covered with withered grass. It was obviously a wild grave that no one had taken care of. The word wife was left on the tombstone. Hong Nyang, I'm back. The soul god knelt in front of the grave and called out in a voice that made people tremble. 100,000 years have passed. I'm finally back, the soul god murmured. Suyu was slightly surprised when he saw this. What was the relationship between the soul god and a mortal? Swoosh. A soul fluctuation flickered in the lonely grave. The soul of a good-looking middle-aged woman floated out of the grave. Around her neck was a string of glittering and translucent necklaces. Suyu was no stranger to it. It was the bloodline of the ruler. Because of this, the woman's mortal soul could exist for 100,000 years. The woman opened her eyes slowly. When she saw the soul god in front of her, she was confused and stunned at first, then gradually shocked. Wu Lang. The woman stepped forward in disbelief and looked at the soul god. Oh, I'm old. You almost couldn't recognize me, the soul god said in a hoarse voice. There were tears in his eyes. The woman cried tears of joy and threw herself into the arms of the soul god. Wu Lang. Suyu turned around silently. It turned out that the soul god had come back from thousands of miles to reunite with the soul of his lover. Feeling the joy of his teammates, Suyu felt out of place. He said in a low voice, "The mission is completed. I'll go first." All of a sudden, Suyu raised his eyes. He stared at the distant sky. There was a strange golden color at the end of the sky. Moreover, the golden color was approaching rapidly. The soul dominator's eyes narrowed, and a trace of killing intent reverberated in his eyes. How persistent! He looked at Suyu and said, "You should leave quickly. Otherwise, you will be implicated." The soul dominator should be aware of Suyu's true strength. If he activated his sacred mortal body, he probably wouldn't need to fear any ruler. However, the soul dominator told him to leave. It was obvious that this was not normal. Suyu took a step forward and immediately used the space domain to leave. However, it was clear that the space domain had already been displayed. With this step, he returned to his original position. Sigh, it's too late. The soul dominator sighed deeply. He looked at the approaching golden light and said with a serious expression, "Prepare to fight to the death." Suyu tried using the space domain several times and found that it was the same. No matter which direction he went, he would always return to the same place. Unless his opponent's space domain was far stronger than his, they would be able to secretly change his space traversal. However, such a person should not exist. After pondering for a while, Suyu suddenly understood. It wasn't his domain that was being controlled. It was his soul. His soul was bewitched. Self-righteous stride in a certain direction. In fact, it was spinning in circles. Was there any need to explain the identity of a person who could use the soul to such an extent? Haha, isn't this the loser from back then? Why is he back again? As the golden light approached, a figure in golden armor led countless strong men at the peak of the road master level, and a great army pressed down. The Martial Path Temple. The Time Dominator's eyes were filled with hatred. The golden-armored man stood with his hands clasped behind his back and looked down at the Time Dominator. "Death Abyss, return that thing. You've held it long enough." It turned out that the Soul Dominator's name was Death Abyss. "I don't know what you're talking about," the Soul Dominator said calmly. The golden-armored man's face was cold. "I never let anyone touch your wife's grave because I knew that one day you would come back. So, how about we be honest with each other?" Today, Death Abyss could not leave. He had to hand over what he wanted. "Didn't you take that thing when you usurped the throne?" the Soul Dominator asked. The golden-armored man said coldly, "Old thing, I'm giving you a chance. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." The Soul Dominator laughed. "Unfilial thing, I should have crushed you to death when you were born." The relationship between the two was actually father and son? Back then, you took advantage of me going to the ultimate ruins to rescue your mother and destroyed my soul. Now, you're still so overbearing? The Soul Dominator said. Suyu's heart palpitated. Hong Yang had once returned to the ultimate ruins. But the Soul Dominator had forcibly found her from the ultimate ruins. The Martial Path Temple said indifferently, "So what? It's better than dying in the destruction of the era, right?" He was gradually losing his patience. "Death Abyss, don't be so long-winded. Hand over the bronze plate of the heavens, sun gazing at air." Eh? Su Yu's eyes were filled with surprise. "That's not right." The Soul Dominator had once said that the bronze plate that Su Yu had obtained was actually an illusory object created with a single thought. But why did the Martial Path Temple say that the bronze plate really existed? "You don't have the right to have it." The Death Abyss held Hong Nyang's soul. The Martial Path Temple's eyes gradually sharpened. "Guards, invite our former Soul Dominator back, and let him enjoy the punishment that I have meticulously designed for him for thousands of years. For the bronze plate, he would do anything." "Evil creature, do you think you can do it?" The Soul Dominator laughed coldly, and a frenzied gale erupted from within his soul. The gale swept through the heavens and the earth, blowing the souls of everyone present out of their bodies. Only the Martial Path Temple and Su Yu, who was wearing the Soul Emperor robe, could keep their souls at ease. "Old thing, you're so stubborn." The Martial Path Temple held a long spear in his hand and thrust it through the air. Tens of thousands of piercing lights rained down like a raging storm. Not only did it break the soul storm, but it also struck a person's body. With a painful groan, the Death Abyss's soul body, which was not very solid in the first place, was immediately riddled with holes of various sizes. "Old thing, are you going to hand it over or not?" the Martial Path Temple berated. But suddenly, his body stiffened. Lowering his head, he discovered that his feet were tightly bound by a shadow, causing him to be unable to move. The source of the shadow was none other than the Death Abyss. It turned out that although he appeared to be conversing with the Death Abyss, he was actually stalling for time so that he could use the Soul Shadow technique. "Evil creature, you haven't learned everything that I have," the Time Dominator bellowed. The shadow left his body and enveloped the entire Martial Path Temple. Chapter 27-26. Under the wrapping, the Martial Path Temple was sealed within, unable to move. No matter how he struggled, he could not break free from the shadow's binding. The Soul Dominator's expression showed a trace of sorrow as he shook his head. "It's my fault for teaching such a rebellious child like you." He slowly put his palms together, the shadow shrinking until it was the size of a fist. Just like that, the new Soul Dominator was sealed by the remnant soul of the old Soul Dominator. Soul Shadow, one of the Soul Dominator's innate soul secret techniques? But it was already lost by the previous Soul Dominator. They were deeply shocked, staring at the old man before them in disbelief. Could it be that you're the missing old sovereign of the previous generation, Wu Wangyuan?" They had been very far away just now. They were far away from each other, and did not hear the conversation between the Martial Path Temple and Wu Wangyuan. They could only determine Wu Wangyuan's possible identity from the Soul Shadow. Wu Wangyuan looked at the shadow in his palm, shaking his head. "Wu Wangyuan died long ago. You got the wrong person." He supported Matchmaker's soul, walking away weakly. Fame and fortune had never been important to him. The only important thing was Matchmaker. "As for your Soul Dominator," Wu Wangyuan thought for a long time, then threw the shadow on the ground. "Release him after I leave." However, he did not expect. When the shadow was thrown on the ground, it immediately shriveled up. There was nothing inside. One thought truth? Wu Wangyuan immediately realized. What he suppressed just now might not be the Martial Path Temple. It was an illusion created by the Martial Path Temple's one-thought truth. But it was too realistic, even he was deceived. He looked around and suddenly, his pupils shrank. On a rock, a man in golden armor stood with his hands behind his back. It was none other than the Martial Path Temple that should have been bound. He sighed with pity. "Wangyuan, after 100,000 years, you are still as disappointing as ever. Have you not learned the lesson of your failure 100,000 years ago?" Wu Wangyuan's face was dark. 100,000 years ago, he valued his relationship with Matchmaker too much and ignored his duty. Thus, his son usurped the throne. Now, after so many years, he was still the same. Even if his son made an unforgivable mistake, Wu Wangyuan could not bear to kill him. Wu Wangyuan said solemnly, "After 100,000 years, your one thought as truth has been cultivated to the point of perfection. So much so that even he was deceived." The martial Tao temple said indifferently, "Abyss of death, you still don't understand me. You don't know what kind of existence your son is." His voice fell. Tens of thousands of shadows suddenly appeared beneath the abyss of death. Whether it was in terms of numbers, concealment, or strength, the shadows far surpassed the abyss of death. Chi with a soft sound, the abyss of death was enveloped by the shadows. Death's abyss of death's voice came from within the shadow. Soul shadow? How do you know it? The soul dominator was proficient in 2 connate secret arts. One thought true, soul shadow technique. However, Wu Wangyuan had only taught the martial way temple one thought is true. The soul shadow technique had always been a secret. But now, the martial arts temple actually used it. How could they not be surprised? That's why I said that you don't know anything about your son. The martial arts temple said faintly. By comprehending it on my own, I understood the key to the soul shadow technique. Wu Wangyuan felt extremely bitter. This son of his was too heaven-defying. He had long reached the point where the student surpassed the master. It was completely reasonable for him to be usurped by his son. "Mother, you should come with me too," the martial arts temple said indifferently. Hong Nyang's soul body was filled with hatred. "Shut up. You are not my son." No one knew a son better than a mother. As a mother, how could she not know what kind of person her son was? The martial arts temple in front of her was definitely not her biological son. Instead, he was a complete stranger. He had disguised himself as his son and taken away everything that belonged to his real son. "What exactly are you?" Hong Nyang roared hysterically. The martial arts temple picked his ear, then lifted his finger and grabbed Hong Nyang. Then, the martial arts temple finally looked at Suyu. "It's your turn." He stared at Suyu. "Someone who is proficient in the space realm. You must be the fish that escaped the net of the space realm that Zhan Wushuang mentioned." "Who? Zhan Wushuang? He was in the soul realm?" Ever since they parted at the Heavenly Legacy cave in the 7 Ultimate Civilizations, he had never seen or heard of him. To think that he was in an 8-star civilization. He had become someone that the martial arts temple valued. What a surprise. "Judging from your tone, it seems like the space domain is already in your bag, isn't it?" Suyu asked calmly. The martial arts temple said calmly, "You are not qualified to question me." As he spoke, a large shadow suddenly appeared around Suyu, swallowing him up instantly. The temple of martial arts waved his hand through the air and grabbed the shadow. Unexpectedly, the moment he touched it, the martial arts temple sensed that something was wrong. He squeezed it hard and the shadow was squashed. A thought becomes real? The martial arts temple was shocked. That guy from the death abyss actually taught the secret technique that represents the legacy of the soul dominator to a human? If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. However, you have already tried to escape from me. It is impossible. The martial arts temple narrowed his eyes and looked around. Wisps of strange soul light flickered in his eyes. Bewitching eye. Wherever his eyes swept across, everything in the world was bewitched by his soul, losing their self-awareness. All of them kept spinning in place, unable to move more than 30 feet away. Suyu, who was hidden, was no exception. It appeared from a corner, but kept turning around in circles like a headless fly. "Capture him," the martial arts temple said calmly. Several Peak Path masters rushed forward immediately. But just as they were about to capture Suyu alive, his figure turned into fragments of time and disappeared without a trace. "Huh! The martial arts temple was finally surprised. The unique secret technique of the Time Dominator, Time Incarnation? He came to his senses and immediately looked around. But the two failed attempts to capture him had given Su Yu enough opportunity to leave. After searching for a long time, he could not find Su Yu. Who is he? The martial arts temple frowned deeply. But looking at the two shadows in his hands, he said, "Let's find the bronze plate first." He left. Behind him, a long river of time and space suddenly appeared. Su Yu walked out from it. He had a thoughtful look on his face. Who is this martial arts temple? Deep in thought, he followed the scent of the Soul Dominator and came to the central city of the Soul Realm. As soon as he entered the city, he found that it was different from the other master domains. There were unidentified people everywhere in the central city of the Soul Realm. There was no moon above their heads, but they could walk freely. And they were respected by ordinary people. What was going on? In other domains, such uncontrollable people had long been listed as key surveillance targets. Chapter 27:27. How could he receive such preferential treatment? The scene in front of him was really strange. But now was not the time to study this. He arrived at the center of Central City. A half-real world in the shape of a moon came into view. That should be the place where the martial arts temple existed. The Time Master and Matchmaker were both brought into it. At that moment, near the half-true world, several peak-stage Earth Lords were scanning the surroundings. Not to mention Su Yu barging in. Even the slightest approach would be sensed by the other party. Unless he exposed that the oil lamp had not been extinguished, he could barge in with his wholly mortal body. Otherwise, it would be very unrealistic. If he rashly used the Yuan level time domain, he should not be able to hide it from the martial Dao Temple, who had achieved great success in the Soul domain. What should he do? At this moment, a woman with no moon above her head calmly entered the entrance of the half-true world. Not only did the nearby guards not stop them, but they also revealed expressions of extreme respect. They did not dare to question him. The experts who were secretly following him also ignored him and did not guard against him. Su Yu's heart moved. He went to a dark place and used his soul domain to erase the moon above his head. Then, he hid in the dark. After a long time, a man without a moon above his head walked out of the half-true world. Su Yu immediately used one true thought to transform into a man's appearance. Then, he swaggered over to the half-truth world. One of the strong men cast a discreet glance at Su Yu. As expected, due to his unique identity, the other party did not bother to examine him carefully. Su Yu walked into the entrance without any expression on his face. As soon as he entered, he saw a pitch-black world filled with moons. Those moons were all created from the Soul domain. Under the illumination of the moonlight, Su Yu felt that everything about him was exposed, and there was no room for him to hide. His heart trembled slightly, and he became even more careful. "Hey Yuan Jun, why did you come back?" Not far from the entrance, a bearded man was arranging a manual. Seeing Su Yu enter, he could not help but be startled. Su Yu did not know who the full bearded man in front of him was, and he did not dare to act rashly. He said calmly, "I dropped something, so I came back to get it." He thought that the other party would ask him what he had dropped. Unexpectedly, the bearded man laughed and scolded, "You finally remembered? I thought you would only remember it after you left Central City." He took out a silk belt and threw it to Su Yu. "Go and look for Fairy Jianxian." Su Yu caught the ribbon. Looking at the 3 roads in front of him, he didn't know which one to take. If he went the wrong way, his identity might be exposed. Fairy Han Xian? Who was she? How can I find her? Su Yu revealed a self-mocking expression. The bearded man laughed and scolded, "Brat, you're playing with me. If you don't go there in time, be careful that Fairy Han Xian will remember you." He pointed to the rightmost path and said with a smile, "Remember the way to the registration hall. Don't forget it again." Su Yu shrugged. "Screw you, You really want to give me pointers? The bearded man laughed. Little did he know that Suyu really did not know the path. After receiving the guidance, Suyu pretended to walk along the path. Right now, he only wanted to find someone who was alone and search their soul for relevant information. However, the half-true world was extremely vast. He didn't see anyone for a long time. Many places that were supposed to be guarded were also empty and uninhabited. Only in a hall near the path that he had to pass, there was a vague silhouette floating about. Suyu's heart thumped as he entered the hall. In the hall, a woman was squatting on the ground with her back facing him, sorting out various documents. Hearing the footsteps behind her, the woman said without turning her head, "Are you here to register? Wait a minute." Suyu walked over slowly. As soon as the woman turned around, he would be able to search her soul. The woman took out a thick account book from a pile of documents. She stood up and turned around, saying, "What are you registering?" Suyu was about to use the secret soul technique to search her soul. Suddenly, he was startled and cried out in surprise, "Han Xian?" The woman in front of him was none other than Han Xian. Wasn't she with Zhan Wushuang? Yes. Zhan Wushuang had become a member of the Martial Path Temple. Wasn't it normal for Han Xian to be here? Han Xian raised her eyes, a touch of surprise flashing in her eyes. "What did you call me just now?" Suyu quickly corrected himself. "Fairy Han Xian." "Nope." Han Xian put down the account book and looked at Suyu suspiciously. "Han Xian is the name of this hall. Other people will only call me Fairy Han Xian. No one will call me Han Xian." The only person who knew her name was Han Xian was Zhan Wushuang. Because she was working in this hall, other people called her Fairy Han Xian. No one other than Zhan Wushuang had ever called her by her real name. Suyu had an idea and immediately said, "Ahem, I accidentally heard Zhan Wushuang calling you that." But Han Xian took a few steps back. She retreated to the side of a bell. It was a warning bell. Once it was rung, the whole half-true world would hear it. Only the master knows the name Zhan Wushuang. The rest will only call him Lord Wushuang. Han Xian stared at Suyu coldly. "Show your true face, you've already been exposed." Suyu laughed. He had fooled the Peak Path Master outside. But because of a name, he had exposed himself. "Fine, but please calm down first." The effect of Suyu's one thought becomes real slowly dissipated. He revealed his true face. Han Xuan's cold eyes changed little by little after his true face was revealed. She was first stunned, then shocked, and finally overjoyed. "Suyu." She wondered if she was dreaming. "Yes, it's been a long time. I didn't expect to meet you here." Suyu also felt that it was strange. Han Xian was incoherent and stammered for a long time, not knowing what to say. Her meeting with Suyu was too sudden. It was only after a long while that she managed to sort out the chaotic thoughts in her mind. "Why are you here? Or did you impersonate Yuan Zhen?" Han Xian asked. Suyu thought for a moment, then asked, "Can I trust you?" Han Xian sighed. "We haven't seen each other for so long that we don't even have basic trust?" Suyu said, "This concerns my life and death, so I have to be careful." "Fine, you can rest assured about my words," Han Xian said seriously. Suyu then told her the whole story. After listening to him, Han Xuan's face turned grave. She said, "It's no wonder that the master summoned everyone immediately after he returned. It turns out that the old master and his wife have been captured." She looked around cautiously, then said hurriedly, "Let's leave now that there's no one around." Suyu said, "I'm here to save them." "You can't save them, you'll only get yourself killed," Han Xian said seriously. "You can't imagine how powerful the Martial Path Temple is." Suyu was full of confidence. "I've seen his methods. Although he's powerful, he's not invincible." However, Han Xian shook her head. "That's why I said you can't imagine how powerful he is. He's different from the masters of the other regions." Chapter 27-28. Han Xian stared at Suyu and asked, "Have you ever seen a ruler who can pass through the defense formation?" "No." All the rulers were hidden in the half-real world. They did not dare to act rashly. They were afraid that the powerful beings in the abyss of the path would take advantage of this opportunity to attack. Therefore, be it the time ruler or the space ruler, they clearly had the ability to easily destroy the defense formation. But they did not move. They did not hesitate to spend hundreds of thousands of years setting up a trap and using external forces to destroy it. They did not dare to act rashly. However, the Martial Path Temple was completely different from the other rulers. Not only did he leave the half-real world, but he also dared to go to the outer realm. Was he not afraid of the terrifying beings in the path abyss coming out to kill him? Moreover, his strength has always been a mystery, Han Xian said seriously. I have never seen him fight seriously, not even once. Su Yu pondered. When the Martial Path Temple had dealt with the Death Abyss, they had not been serious. All of them effortlessly suppressed the abyss of death. Their strength was not what Su Yu had seen. The strength they had shown was just the tip of the iceberg. Seeing the change in Su Yu's expression, Han Xian said, So, leave quickly before he finds you. Don't think about saving people. That will only get you trapped. There will be no other result. However, Su Yu did not leave. Instead, he smiled faintly at Han Xian and said, Thank you. After so many years, Han Xian was still sincere to him. If she had any hostility, she would have tricked him into risking his life. She would not have tried to persuade him to go back. However, I still want to try, Su Yu said. Even if the Martial Path Temple was so powerful, would he be afraid of it? At most, he would expose the secret of his sacred body and fight to save the Death Abyss. Moreover, he did not need to fight it head-on. Hey you! Why are you still so stubborn? Han Xian said anxiously. But she also felt that it was only natural. In her memory, Su Yu had always been like this. He would not back down no matter what difficulties were placed in front of him. Although his temperament was much gentler now, he was no longer as rebellious as when he was young. However, he still had an unyielding spirit. If you want to die, I won't stop you, Han Xian said angrily. She took out a map and threw it to Su Yu. She pointed at the center of the map and said, That's the heavenly prison of the martial arts temple. It's used to imprison the criminals that he values the most. If the former ruler and his wife are still alive, they should be in the imperial prison. Su Yu smiled gratefully. Thank you. Without Han Xuan's guidance, it would have taken a lot of effort just to find the heavenly prison. Hurry up and leave. I'll pretend you were never here. Han Xian waved her hand. Su Yu smiled and left immediately. The moon in the sky was constantly emitting the power of perspective. The longer he stayed here, the more likely it was that he would be exposed. Han Xuan's eyes became gloomy as she looked at Su Yu's departing back. She sighed softly and said, I haven't seen him for so many years, yet he's still so busy. I didn't even get a chance to talk to him properly. Holding an account book in her hand, she forced herself to calm down and carefully flipped through it. But the more he looked, the more restless he became. Finally, she closed the account book and looked out of the palace. She sighed and said, Sigh, I still can't watch you die. She bit her red lips and immediately chased after him. Back to Su Yu. With the guidance of the map, he quickly arrived at the heavenly prison. The heavenly prison was an open valley. In the valley there were 100 crosses. On each cross there was a steel nail made of souls, nailed to a living being. They were all alive. However, because of the soul steel nail, they had fallen into a coma. All of them had their heads lowered and were motionless. Su Yu's eyes swept over them one by one. He was surprised to find that the people on the crosses were all descendants of the rulers. Not only were there descendants of the Soul Master, but there were also descendants of the Space Master, the Death Master, the Fate Master, and other rulers. Su Yu was secretly surprised. They are all descendants of the rulers who have ended the competition for the rulers. The rulers mentioned above had all fallen in recent years. He did not expect that after they fell, their descendants would suffer the fate of being imprisoned here. What was even more surprising was that the ones who imprisoned them were none other than the martial arts temple, the sole master. Why is this happening? Su Yu thought to himself. Even if the 8 great rulers were not on good terms. But there was no need for them to kill each other's descendants, right? What was the martial arts temple trying to do? A huge doubt arose in his heart. As he pondered, his gaze swept over. Suddenly, he saw 2 figures. It was the captured Wang Yuan and his wife, Hong Yang. Both of them were nailed to the center of the cross. Both of them were soul bodies, and they were injured by the soul steel nails. Soul fluorescence was constantly flowing out of their bodies. If this continued in less than a month, their lives would be gone. In front of their crosses, a fierce woman with no moon above her head was waving a whip and lashing Hong Yang. Wang Yuan, hand over the bronze plate, unless you want to watch your beloved woman be whipped to death. The woman was a confidant of the martial arts temple. At this moment, she was extremely ruthless. Hong Yang said with tears in her eyes, "Wu Leng, don't say it." If she said it, Wu Wangyuan would lose his last bit of value. He would be erased immediately and completely returned to dust. The woman sneered. "I think you should be thinking about how to die a quick death, instead of daydreaming about someone coming to save you." As she spoke, she lashed the whip fiercely, causing Hong Yang to scream. Wang Yuan's eyes bulged as he struggled with all his might. But every time he moved, the soul steel nails emitted heart-wrenching pain. His soul felt like it was being electrocuted, paralyzed and unable to move. "Don't waste your energy. This is a secret technique designed for you rulers and the descendants of the rulers. The more you move, the more pain you will feel." No matter how muddle-headed Wu Wangyuan was, he finally sensed that something was amiss. Who is the martial arts temple? A normal ruler would not capture the descendants of other rulers for no reason. You don't need to know. All you need to know is to hand over the bronze plate. The woman raised the whip and lashed it down again. Hong Yang screamed in pain. Wu Wangyuan's body and soul were being tortured. But he could do nothing. He could only watch helplessly as the woman he loved fell into endless torture. Su Yu looked left and right as he observed. After confirming that there was no one nearby, he prepared to make his move. A voice entered his ears. "Don't move." Su Yu's heart shook. He turned to look. It was Han Xian. Chapter 27-29. Then, the doctrine artifact spread out and took Su Yu into it. The two of them squeezed under the small cloak, and they could hear each other's breath. Han Xian suddenly felt a little nervous. This was probably the closest they had ever been to each other. "Why are you here?" Su Yu asked. Han Xian pretended to be indifferent. "If you're discovered, you'll drag me down. How can I not come?" That was what she said. But Su Yu understood that Han Xian was worried about being dragged down. The first time she saw him, she was already on the alert. She didn't give him a map. "How can I repay you?" Su Yu felt a little guilty. Their reunion after so many years had put Han Xian in a difficult position. "You should leave now." "That's the best way to repay me," Han Xian said. There was a sweetness and satisfaction in her heart that she couldn't understand. It was as if doing one thing for Su Yu was what she had been longing for. She blushed and didn't dare to look at Su Yu's eyes. She was afraid that Su Yu's penetrating eyes would see through her. She said seriously, "The prison ahead is not a place you can enter easily. If you're not careful, you'll easily trigger the soul seal." She grabbed a handful of moonlight with her palm. Then, she sprinkled it in front of her. Suddenly, the air in front of her trembled. Several hidden words of the heavenly book flashed and disappeared. Words of the heavenly book? Su Yu was secretly surprised. Han Xian said seriously, "Did you see that? The whole area of the prison is densely covered with these words of the heavenly book. There's no way to avoid them." It looked like an open prison, but in fact, it was tighter than any closed prison. Even if one touched any of the words of the heavenly book, it would be immediately sensed by the martial principal temple. When the martial principal temple sensed it, who could possibly escape from his half-true world? The only way to enter and rescue someone is to get the incantation to enter the prison, Han Xian said. Only by activating the incantation, the words of the heavenly book will automatically open a path. Her eyes slowly drifted to the woman. That woman is called Yao Ji, the favorite concubine of the martial principal temple. She's also one of the few people who knows the incantation. Her advice couldn't be more clear. She wanted Su Yu to capture the woman alive and obtain the incantation from her. That's all I can say. You're on your own, Han Xian said quietly. Su Yu was moved. It was Han Xuan's limit to say so much. If she continued to speak or did anything else, she would most likely be exposed. I will surely repay your kindness, Su Yu said. Han Xian shook her head. The fact that you're still alive is the best grace I can give you. Her face darkened. All the way from the 9 states. How many of her friends had fallen one after another? In her life, there were only 2 people who had accompanied her to this day. One was Zhan Wushuang. One of them was Su Yu. The world was cruel like this. Being alive was the best form of gratitude. Su Yu looked at her deeply. I will, and so will you. Han Xian nodded and prostrated on the ground. She stared at the prison without blinking. Su Yu was also lying beside her. Just like that, the 2 of them watched silently. Finally, a whole day passed. Hong Yang's soul was so weak that it could dissipate at any time. But Wu Wangyuan endured the great pain in his heart and did not speak. The enchantress was panting. After a whole day, she herself was tired. But the 2 of them did not speak. Fine, I'll ask the Lord to execute your lover. The enchantress threw down the whip. She silently activated the spell, making the invisible words of the heavenly book make way. Then, she left the prison. Just as she was about to leave, Su Yu suddenly jumped out from a place where there was no one around. With lightning speed, he activated his time and space domains. Time and space freeze. Just in case, he froze twice, making it impossible for her to escape. As expected, the enchantress only had time to show a shocked expression. The warning words were still in her mouth, but she was frozen on the spot before she could finish them. The enchantress's cultivation was only at the early stage of the Path Master. It was not difficult to capture her alive. He stepped forward and started searching her soul with secret soul technique. But just as his soul was about to enter her soul, something strange happened. A dazzling moonlight radiated from the enchantress's body. The nearby time and space freeze melted immediately. The enchantress was freed. Without thinking, she opened her mouth and screamed. There's, Su Yu's expression changed drastically. It was too late to stop her. Once she screamed, even if the Martial Path Temple was not alerted, the nearby patrolling guards would be alerted. Pow! But she only had time to scream a single word. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed behind her. Han Xian jumped out, holding a black brick, and smashed it on her head. The enchantress's eyes rolled back, and she fainted on the spot. Su Yu looked at Han Xian in shock. Han Xian put away the black brick, patted the dirt off her small hands, and said, "What are you looking at? Can't I make the call with the brick?" Yes, she could. But this was completely different from his impression of Han Xuan's temperament. "Let's go quickly." She shouted a single word just now. The nearby guards must have sensed it. With Han Xuan's help, the 2 of them dragged the enchantress into the darkness with the invisibility cloak. "I'll keep a lookout for you. Search her soul immediately." Han Xian looked around gravely. Su Yu nodded and started searching the enchantress's mind with secret soul technique. Before long, he found a piece of memory in the enchantress's mind. It was the entire content of the incantation. He probed it with his soul and was about to read it. All of a sudden, a soul steel needle shot out of the memory, piercing Su Yu's soul. Fortunately, Su Yu reacted in time and retracted his soul. Only then did he survive. "It's a trap." Su Yu's heart trembled. He looked at the enchantress again. She was no longer breathing. His soul was annihilated by the steel needle that shot out. How cruel! The enchantress was the Martial Path Temple's favorite concubine. However, he still planted such a vicious needle in his beloved concubine's soul. If anyone tried to look into the memory of the incantation, the soul steel needle would explode, killing both the concubine and the examiner. The concubine must have left behind a life jade plate, and it was guarded by someone. Once the guard found that the jade plate was broken, he would definitely inform the Martial Path Temple. In at most 5 minutes, the Martial Path Temple would notice the enchantress's death and come to the heavenly prison. Is she dead? Han Xian turned her head to look, and her face was extremely gloomy. She pulled Su Yu and said in a low voice, "We can't wait any longer. Let's go, the Martial Path Temple will be here soon." Su Yu shook his head. "You go first, don't worry about me." He came to the front of the heavenly prison in a flash. "Are you going to force your way in? Don't be foolish, you'll only die faster." Han Xian exclaimed in a low voice. Su Yu took a deep breath and said, "I just want to give it a try." He recalled the contents of the heavenly book in his mind. Although he didn't memorize the incantations in the brief search just now, he found that the incantations were all messy. Chapter 27:30. He had mastered most of the words of the heavenly book. If he recited them all, he believed he could cover all the words in the heavenly prison. Time was running out. He immediately recited the words of the heavenly book he had mastered throughout his life. Tens of thousands of words were recited in a short time. Then, Su Yu grabbed a handful of moonlight and threw it forward. He heaved a sigh of relief when all the words of the heavenly book in front of him were expelled. Not a single one was left. Han Xian was dumbfounded. How is this possible? This was the heavenly prison seal that the Martial Path Temple was most proud of. He had invited countless grandmasters to try to break it. However, none of them had ever succeeded. What about Su Yu? He broke through it so easily? What did he do? Han Xian knew that Su Yu was a very special man who could not be judged by common sense. Therefore, after so many years, she had already raised Su Yu's ability by several levels in her heart. However, she only knew after seeing him with her own eyes. She had underestimated Su Yu. The fact that the heavenly prison seal that the Martial Path Temple was proud of was easily broken was the best proof. Su Yu undid the seal and immediately came to the cross. He checked the soul steel nail to make sure there were no traps. Then, he reached out and tried to pull the steel nail out. However, as soon as he grabbed it, a sharp pain spread from his palm to his whole body. The death abyss was about to fall into a coma under the effect of the steel nail. Sensing a strange movement in front of him, he opened his eyes with difficulty. Seeing that it was Su Yu, he was shocked. "Su Yu? Why are you here?" Su Yu smiled calmly. "I still can't leave you alone." The Soul Dominator had not only given him pointers but also saved his life at a critical moment. Now, he could not bear to abandon them. However, this steel nail was extremely tricky. Su Yu had to withdraw his hand after touching it. Otherwise, even his soul would be hurt. This was when he was wearing the Soul Emperor robe. If not for that, Su Yu's soul would probably have been knocked unconscious by that touch just now. "Don't worry about me, go quickly," the Soul Dominator said hurriedly. "This place is not for you." Having seen the power of the Martial Path Temple, the Soul Dominator hurried him. Su Yu stared at the steel nail, lost in thought. Did he have to use the power of the sacred mortal body? At this moment, Han Xian ran over and said hurriedly, "The Martial Arts Temple will know about the changes here soon." Time was of the essence. The Soul Dominator said anxiously, "Hurry up and leave. Don't drag you down because of us." His heart was incomparably moved, and waves of warmth flowed through him. He had been by Su Yu's side for many years, even though he was unconscious most of the time. However, he would occasionally sober up and observe Su Yu's actions. He realized that this person was ancient god Nine Dragon's successor. However, he couldn't be disgusted at all. In terms of character, he was impeccable. Thus, he had never harbored any malice toward the successor of ancient god Nine Dragon. Even now, the other party's temperament was still the same. He had actually come to rescue him for the sake of a small favor that he felt was unimportant. One could imagine how moved he was. "Ruler, we don't have much time left. Please give me some pointers on how to remove this soul steel nail," Suyu said. In terms of the Soul Dao, he was naturally inferior to the Soul Dominator. The Soul Dominator gazed at Suyu deeply. If he didn't let Suyu save him, he wouldn't give up. Even if he had to take greater risks in the future, he would still choose to try. With your soul attainments, you can't pull it out for the time being. The Soul Dominator seemed to have made up his mind. He looked at the Soul Dominator's bloodline on Hong Yang's neck and said, "If you don't mind, you can refine my Soul Dominator's bloodline and raise your soul realm to the Yuan level." "What? Absorb the Soul Dominator's bloodline? Wouldn't he become a Soul Dominator in that way?" Suyu certainly wouldn't mind. He was even willing. How could he dislike a Yuan level that could raise another domain to its peak state? "Can I make it in time?" Suyu frowned. He had spent a whole year refining the space domain's bloodline. He didn't have a year's worth of time now. "If you are alone, you might not be able to do it, but with me here, you have enough time," the Soul Dominator said. Suyu's eyes lit up. Without further ado, he came to Hong Yang and said, "Excuse me." Hong Yang was so weak that she couldn't even open her eyes. She had no idea what was happening in the outside world. Suyu took out the Soul Dominator's bloodline on her neck. Hong Yang's body and soul immediately faded away. Suyu's eyes changed slightly. He had to save her immediately. Otherwise, without the protection of the Soul Dominator's bloodline, she would dissipate immediately. He got the Soul Dominator's bloodline and immediately sat down cross-legged in front of the Soul Dominator and began refining it on the spot. His personal refining speed was very slow. The Soul Dominator's bloodline couldn't be integrated into his body in a short time. At that moment, the Soul Dominator's eyes shot out two beams of blazing white light, shining on Suyu's body. Suddenly, the Soul Dominator's bloodline, like swallows returning to their nest, took the initiative to integrate into Suyu's body. It quickly merged with Suyu's own soul domain. After the two merged, his soul domain continued to rise at an alarming rate. In just half a cup of tea's time, he successfully broke through to the Yuan level. At that moment, Suyu's body exuded endless soul energy. He opened his eyes and glanced around. Everything he saw in his field of vision was like a completely different person. Moreover, there was a vague feeling of looking down on all the creatures of the world and grasping the pinnacle of the supreme heavenly law. With a sweep of his eyes, he easily penetrated the half-real world and saw things that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Even the abyss outside the domain could be seen more clearly. Some particularly terrifying existences could feel it more clearly. "What is that place?" Suyu whispered softly. He had already felt it when the Space Yuan level domain was completed. Now he felt it again. However, time was of the essence. There was no time to think. Suyu held the steel nail in his palm. Waves of tingling pain came again. However, compared to before, the tingling at this moment was only limited to the palm. It didn't affect his entire soul. This was because his soul domain had become strong enough to be on the same level as the Martial Path Temple, coupled with the defense of the Soul Emperor robe. Therefore, it was difficult for the opponent's secret soul technique to hurt him. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Suyu pulled hard. The soul steel nail was immediately removed. The Soul Dominator fell from the cross powerlessly. Then it was Hong Yang. He rescued two people. Suyu looked at the descendants of the other rulers on the crosses. With a thought, he quickly plucked out all the soul steel nails from their bodies and rescued them. After all of them were rescued, Suyu looked at Han Xian, hesitated for a moment and said, "Han Xian, come with me." Chapter 2731. Not only had Han Xian provided the information, but she had also fought personally in the end. There was no guarantee that the martial arts temple would not notice. Han Xuan's heart thumped. Although she understood that Su Yu's "follow me" at this moment was not what he had in mind. However, he still couldn't help but feel excited. She was about to nod in agreement, but after thinking for a moment, she said, "You go first, I'll look for you later." She took out a space communication jade artifact and passed it to Su Yu. "I want to bid farewell to senior brother Wushuang." The people of the martial arts temple were too cold. She wanted to persuade Zhan Wushuang to leave with her. "All right. Be careful, and remember to leave as soon as possible. Don't delay any longer, or else it will be very dangerous," Su Yu said. With the character of the Martial Path Temple, once they find out that Han Xian is helping them, they will definitely kill them. The consequences could be imagined. Han Xian nodded her head. She immediately put on the invisible Dao artifact and went to look for Zhan Wushuang. Su Yu led the crowd and left quickly. He used the same trick again, using one thought to become real, and swaggered out of the exit. Regardless of whether it was the guards at the entrance of the main hall or the hidden experts nearby, none of them noticed it at all. He had successfully left the half-truth world. Su Yu immediately led them to a safe place to hide. In an underground ruin, Su Yu released the Soul Dominator and Hong Yang. He clapped his palms together, and a soul ripple attached to the Soul Dominator and Matchmaker. In this way, the martial arts temple would not be able to track the two of them. The Soul Dominator took a deep breath, stood up with great difficulty, and bowed deeply to Su Yu. "Mr. Su, thank you for saving me and Hong Yang's lives." Su Yu sighed and said, "You don't have to be so courteous with me. We've experienced so much together, so it can be considered fate." Starting with the bronze plate. So they knew each other. The Soul Dominator had been hiding its existence. However, Su Yu's growth had been witnessed by the Soul Dominator. The Soul Dominator's eyes were filled with deep emotions as he stared at Su Yu and murmured, "I never thought that such a puny human would one day become my savior." To be exact, he had never thought that Su Yu would be able to reach this stage. When she first met Su Yu was just a small martial artist. In his eyes, they were probably not even comparable to Ant. But after 200 years, that Ant had already grown into a mighty existence that could look down on the starry skies, able to face off against the 8 sovereigns and laugh proudly at the sacred mountain. He was even indebted to her for saving him. "You're exaggerating. We're just friends." As Su Yu spoke, he immediately imbued Hong Yang with his soul energy to replenish her dissipating body. However, the soul strength he poured into her could only delay the dissipation of Matchmaker. It was impossible for him to keep on instilling. Sooner or later, Hong Yang would disappear from this world. "I'm sorry. I took away the bloodline that could have sustained her soul," Su Yu said. The Soul Dominator shook his head and sighed. "How can I blame you? Without your help, she and I wouldn't have lasted more than a month. Besides, even without the Soul Dominator bloodline, I have other ways." The Soul Dominator said, "I want to head to the Tao Abyss and use its water to reconstruct our bodies." Their bodies had long since been scattered. Hong Yang's cultivation level was mediocre, and any body that he casually created could contain her soul. However, the Soul Dominator's soul was simply too powerful. It was impossible for the body he had molded to contain it. Once the soul entered, it would immediately cause the body to explode. Su Yu's heart moved. If Yun Yazi's soul recovered, it would also be exceptionally powerful. At that time, an ordinary body wouldn't be enough. He should also consider getting some water from the Tao Abyss for Yun Yazi. "Do you need me to accompany you there?" Su Yu asked. The Soul Dominator was silent for a long time, then shook his head slightly. "You'd better not." Su Yu thought for a moment. "Is it because I have the bloodline of the 2 masters that those in the Tao Abyss dislike me?" However, to his surprise, The Soul Dominator stared at Su Yu with a complicated look and said, "No, it's because you are the descendant of the ancient god Jilong." "How could that be?" According to the words of the Time Dominator and the Space Dominator, they were enemies with the horrible beings in the Tao Abyss. Could it be that the ancient god Jilong and the beings in the Tao Abyss were also enemies? Su Yu asked, "Why?" The Soul Dominator pointed in the direction of the Tao Abyss and said, "If I say it, the beings there will definitely sense it. If I go there, I won't be able to get away with it." Hearing this, Su Yu didn't make things difficult for him. He sighed softly and said, "It's okay, just go." However, Su Yu's heart was now filled with confusion. Who was in the Tao Abyss? Why were they hostile to him because of his identity as the descendant of the ancient god Jilong? Were they the ones who caused the disappearance of the ancient god Jilong in the Tao Abyss? Unfortunately, the Soul Dominator was under the control of others and couldn't answer. The Soul Dominator was slightly apologetic. He took out a puppet made of souls and handed it to Su Yu. "What is this?" Su Yu was puzzled. The Soul Dominator said in a hoarse voice, "The thing that the martial arts temple wants the most." A bronze plate? However, that wasn't it. This was just a puppet refined from a soul. "Do you remember the one thought to become real that I taught you?" the Soul Dominator asked. Su Yu nodded. "Of course I do." The Soul Dominator said, "Why don't you use the one thought to become real to imitate this puppet?" Now that Su Yu had reached the Yuan level, he could imitate almost anything. It shouldn't be difficult to imitate a mere puppet. However, when Su Yu tried to imitate it, he found that what he imitated turned out to be a bronze plate. Su Yu was stunned and puzzled. This was the first time this had happened to him. He had imitated a puppet, but what appeared in the end was a bronze plate. The Soul Dominator stared at the puppet and sighed. "This is the 10th birthday present I prepared for my son at the Martial Arts Temple. As long as the Martial Arts Temple can learn my one thought to become real one day, they will get the real bronze plate. However, he couldn't wait to attack me before he could learn this secret." Su Yu's heart thumped. So, the Soul Dominator imparted the one thought to become real to Su Yu with the intention of giving him the real bronze plate? The bronze plate came from the Tao Abyss. "There are many secrets in it that I haven't studied thoroughly until now," the Soul Dominator said. The Soul Dominator said, "One of them includes using the bronze plate to rescue the people in the sinkhole." "What?" Su Yu was shocked. The secret of rescuing Xie Xiaoye was in the bronze plate? He bowed and said gratefully, "Senior, I will always remember your great kindness." The Soul Dominator laughed in a hoarse voice. "You have done me a great favor. You don't have to be so polite." He helped Hong Yang up. "The Martial Arts Temple will soon go crazy and look for us. We will leave first so that we don't implicate you again." If he didn't leave now, it might be difficult for him to leave later. Su Yu nodded. "Senior, have a safe journey." Hong Yang nodded and turned into a soul light that dissipated. Chapter 2732. He waited for a long time, but Han Xian did not send him a message. Su Yu remained patient. With a thought, he released all the descendants of the masters that he had found. After a while, they had all woken up. When they saw Su Yu, they began to flee in all directions vigilantly. However, they were in the underground ruins, and they had nowhere to run. Some of the descendants of the masters were ready to break through the ruins and escape to the outside world. Only a few of them were calm, staring at Su Yu. "If you want to die, I can help you, lest you drag me down with you," Su Yu said indifferently. His loud voice contained the space domain, which suppressed all the descendants of the masters present. Everyone was bound to the spot by the space domain, unable to move. Space domain. You are also a descendant of the masters? The descendants of the masters were overjoyed. Until a descendant of the space master poured cold water on them. It was a young man who looked somewhat like Yanran. There is no such person among the descendants of the space master. The young man was calm. The crowd was in an uproar, and he added, "But, he is our savior." Only then did the panicking descendants of the sovereign Lord finally regain their composure. Right. They had been crucified by the Martial Path Temple. Now that they had appeared here, they could only have been rescued by the human in front of them. Thinking of this, they regained their composure and were extremely grateful. Suyu stared at them and said, "Do you still have the bloodline of the masters?" The young man shook his head slightly. "We were poached by the Martial Path Temple as soon as we were caught. If not for the fact that we still had some value, we would probably have been killed on the spot." A trace of disappointment flashed in Suyu's eyes. Now that he had mastered the Yuan realm of 2 great domains, Suyu suddenly had a plan. Rather than letting the Yuan realm of the masters benefit from others, why not obtain them all himself? All 8 great domains had reached the Yuan realm. It was equivalent to gathering the domains of the 8 great masters in one body. Would the power erupting from it be weaker than the mortal holy body? Not necessarily, right? Until now, the 8 great masters had never joined forces. Their combined strength would be an unimaginable unknown. "I am indebted to you. Is there anything I can do for you?" The young man felt a little uneasy. He was worried that Suyu had ulterior motives, so he wanted to satisfy him in other ways. Suyu muttered, "I want to ask you some questions. First of all, do you know why the Martial Tao Temple wants your sovereign bloodline?" The other hegemonic descendants all looked confused. "I'm not sure. Logically speaking, only descendants of the Sovereign Lord should be able to absorb the blood of the Sovereign Lord. I really don't know why the Martial Arts Temple dug up our bloodline." Everyone shook their heads. Only the descendant of the Space Chief Sovereign stood there silently. Suyu noticed it, and his eyes flickered. "What do you want to know?" The young man nodded hesitantly. "Because my Space Dominator bloodline is relatively powerful, I passed out a little later than the others. I happened to hear some fragmented news." "Oh? Speak." Suyu's eyes shone brightly. The young man said, "Before I fainted that day, I vaguely heard the Martial Way Temple say that the descendants of the ancient god Jielong have rebuilt the 8 domains." Hearing this, Suyu's eyes shone brightly. A descendant of ancient god Jielong? Suyu had always been concerned about his existence. After all, from a certain perspective, ancient god descendants had the right to inherit everything that ancient god Nine Dragon had, including the divine Nine Dragon Cauldron. Suyu couldn't help but guess what the young man had heard. Could it be that a descendant of the ancient god Nine Dragon was planning to use the bloodline of the descendants of the 8 great masters to forcibly open the 8 domains? Back then, how much danger had Suyu taken to open the 8 domains? Suyu's body and soul had almost been destroyed. Now, the descendants of the ancient god Nine Dragon were planning to succeed by trickery? Anything else? Suyu asked. The young man shook his head, but then nodded. "I also heard the last sentence, but it was very vague. I'm not sure." "Speak." The young man hesitated. "I heard him say that the ancient god Nine Dragon was coming back." "What?" Suyu was shocked. "Are you sure you didn't hear it wrong?" The young man smiled bitterly. "That's why I'm not sure." How many years had the ancient god Nine Dragon been missing? He had disappeared in the Tao Abyss almost since the beginning of the era. Now that he had suddenly returned, how could he not be shocked? Suyu could no longer remain calm. The ancient god Nine Dragon, Suyu's life had changed completely since he had obtained the ancient god Nine Dragon's divine artifact. If not, now, he was just a pile of bones that had been dead for at least 100 years. For some reason, Suyu desperately wanted to see the ancient god Nine Dragon. Just seeing him once was already enough for him. Taking a deep breath, Suyu said, "Second question. Do you know the situation in the life zone?" The young man's archery skills were extensive. He shook his head. "Very bad. The Life Master is not far from death. Countless mysterious forces have appeared in her territory, lying dormant in the dark. Once she dies, the descendants of the Masters may suffer the same fate as us. Hearing that, Su Yu's heart tightened. He couldn't let the Life Master die so easily. He had to ask her to make a move before she died and restore Yun Yazi's soul completely. All right, I only need you to answer 2 questions. When the ground is safe, you can leave on your own, Su Yu said. As for the descendants of the hegemons, there was no point in keeping them around. Besides, there was no enmity between them. Naturally, he could only let them go. The young man thought for a moment, then said, I think you are the descendant of the ancient god Nine Dragon, Su Yu, the one with the sacred mortal body, right? Su Yu glanced at him. Of all the descendants of the masters, this man was the calmest and wisest. Do you have any advice for me? Su Yu asked. The young man laughed. How am I qualified to give advice to the sacred body, Su? I just want to remind you of something. Speak. The young man said, I once heard the Space Master mention that someone is recasting the clone of Prince Xiaoyao to deal with you. Su Yu's eyes flickered with a hint of coldness. How could he forget that the clone of Prince Xiaoyao, whose upper body had been restored, had chased after Yanran? Why? Isn't that person the Space Master or a descendant of the Space Master? Su Yu asked. He had always thought that the one who had chased after Yanran was one of her brothers or sisters. The young man shook his head. No. Even the fragment of Prince Xiaoyao's clone that the Space Master had was taken away by a strong man. What? Su Yu raised his eyebrows. Someone who could take something from the Space Master? What kind of existence was that? Chapter 2733. Who was it? Who wanted to gather all of Prince Xiaoyao's clones? Who was so eager to deal with him? Were they some servants trained by the Holy Mountain? His heart was full of doubts. After thinking for a long time, Su Yu nodded to the young man. Thank you. What's your name? The young man said, Huang Chen, I am Yanran's brother. He looked at Su Yu deeply. The news that Yanran was protected by holy bodies Su had already spread. Oh! Su Yu was surprised. No wonder this young man looked similar to Yanran. Su Yu paused and shot out a few crystal balls. Huang Chen caught it and examined the extremely pure energy within it. He could not help but reveal a joyful expression. He had lost the bloodline of the master and had no realm power. The only thing he could rely on was his cultivation. These energy balls were like a timely rain. He knelt down in gratitude. After a pause, he said, Holy Body Su, I suggest you extract all the bloodline of the Space Master from my sister's body. Su Yu asked calmly, why? He had never taken back what he had given away. Huang Chen said, There is a group of mysterious people in the Martial Path Temple who are taking advantage of the weakness of the 8 Masters to plunder the bloodline of the Master. Holy Body Su is kind enough to give the bloodline of the Space Master to my sister, but it is a disaster for her, not a blessing. Huang Chen said in a low voice, If I am not mistaken, I am afraid a group of mysterious forces have already set their eyes on my sister. Hearing this, Su Yu became serious. The appearance of the Martial Path Temple and the mysterious dark forces was indeed beyond Su Yu's expectations. He had thought that the 8 Masters were the greatest rulers of the 8-star civilization. He did not expect that there was a powerful force behind them. They appeared when the 8 Masters were weak and dying, stirring up trouble. If so, would Siener be in danger? She was the descendant of the ancient god of Jiu. Would she also be targeted by this force? Thinking of this, he began to worry. He looked at the communication device again, and could not help but frown. Why hadn't Han Xian sent a message? Could something have happened to her? Meanwhile, in the heavenly prison, the Martial Path Temple stood in front of the empty heavenly prison, his face gloomy. When did Enchantress die? Martial Arts Temple asked in a deep voice. One of the experts guarding the life medallion said in a trembling voice, 2 cups of tea ago, I discovered that the medallion had shattered. I immediately notified the Lord Sovereign. Wu Dao Temple narrowed his eyes. 2 cups of tea? He shook his head. What kind of person would be able to break through the defense of the heavenly book characters within the time it takes to brew 2 cups of tea? Moreover, he even forcefully pulled out my soul steel needle? This is impossible. The life tablet keeper trembled and immediately knelt on the ground to beg for mercy. I really didn't. The martial arts temple didn't even turn his head and said indifferently, "Take him away." The expert immediately dragged the person out. Not long after, there was a scream. An expert came back with his head. "Reporting to my lord, he has been executed." The martial arts temple nodded indifferently. "Bring me the records of the most recent entrances and exit." Soon, the bearded man at the entrance of the half-truth world was called over. Wu Dao Temple looked at him and immediately read the memories in his mind. Suddenly, the eyes of the martial arts temple fixed on a disciple. Not long after this person left, he returned to the half-truth world. His words and actions were somewhat strange. It was as if he didn't know the way. "Something's wrong. Contact this person. Where is he now?" With the order, an expert quickly came to reply. "My lord, this person is called Yuan Zhen. He is currently in the life domain. It would take at least a day to get here from there." Therefore, the Yuan Zhen who appeared in the half-truth world was definitely not a real person. It was another person in disguise. "Bring the greetings here." The martial arts temple ordered again. In the bearded man's memory, Yuan Zhen went to the greetings hall to register. An expert immediately flashed over. In the end, what he saw was an empty hall. He realized something was wrong and immediately came back to report. Hearing this, the martial arts temple's eyes slowly narrowed. "Gone?" The martial arts temple's eyes flashed with suspicion. There were only 2 explanations for her disappearance. One was that she was already dead. The other was that she ran away. "If she's alive, I want to see her. If she's dead, I want to see her corpse," the martial arts temple ordered. Immediately, the entire soul domain was activated. While vigorously searching for the rescued soul dominator and the many descendants of the ruler. While frantically searching for Han Xian. Even the army far away at the border received the order from Central City. In a military camp, an old and prudent general was giving a lecture. "This season, everyone has performed well. I will report your achievements to Central City." In the tent, there were 2 rows of generals of different ages. Among them, there was an exceptionally young general. He frowned slightly and murmured, "Still without me?" At this moment, the smile on the old general's face disappeared. His tone changed. "However, there are some people who are extremely irresponsible and have seriously delayed the military situation. I have already reported to Central City. I am preparing to remove them from their positions." Instantly, everyone's heart tightened. Someone was going to be removed from his position? Everyone's gaze swept towards Zhang Wushuang as if they had agreed on it. Who was the most likely to be removed from his position? Without a doubt, it was Zhang Wushuang. He had no background in the military. It was said that he was originally a slave. It was not easy for him to slowly climb to his current position with some ability. However, he was not flexible and had no background. No matter how hard he worked in the military, no matter how many contributions he made, there was no hope for him to go further. In fact, many of the contributions he made were forcibly taken away by those with background. In the military camp, he could be said to be depressed and unfulfilled. He did not expect the new commander to be so ruthless. He had been in charge of the army for half a year and was ready to eradicate Zhang Wushuang completely and drive him out of the military camp. Should one say that he was sad or pitiful? You know who I am talking about. Wait for the notice from Central City. The old general said, "All right, the meeting is adjourned." Before leaving, he took a deep look at Zhang Wushuang. Just as the others had guessed, the person the old general was talking about was none other than Zhang Wushuang. Zhang Wushuang clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with grief and indignation. "Why? I have already worked so hard. Why is it still like this? There seemed to be flames of anger burning in his chest. Ever since coming to an 8-star civilization, he had done everything he could to fight for a better environment for Han Xian. However, in the end, he still had nothing. Unfair. Too unfair. Zhang Wushuang left the military camp in a daze. He was prepared to return to the temporary base in the city to have a good rest and think of a way to protect his way of being a general. However, just as he entered the city. Chapter 2734. Who is it? Zhang Wushuang's expression changed. He was about to attack, but the black-robed person took off his hat and revealed his face. Han Xian. Zhang Wushuang immediately stopped. He was shocked. Aren't you working in the half-truth world? Why are you here? The half-truth world didn't allow people to leave as they pleased. Plus, Han Xian was dressed mysteriously, which made him even more suspicious. Han Xian looked around cautiously and lowered her voice. Brother Wushuang, let's leave the Soul Realm. This wasn't the first time Han Xian made this suggestion. However, Zhang Wushuang rejected it every time. The world was vast, where would they find a place to stay? It was good enough to find a place to stay in the Soul Realm. There was no need to risk their lives outside. However, at this moment, Zhang Wushuang surprisingly didn't object. He was about to be impeached and removed from the general position he fought so hard for. The future was bleak. What was the point of staying? Have you thought about where to go? Zhang Wushuang asked. Han Xian smiled mysteriously. There's a mysterious person who will bring us to a safe place. He's definitely reliable. Mysterious person? Zhang Wushuang didn't doubt it. Han Xian was in the half-truth world and could come into contact with people with status. It wasn't strange for her to know a mysterious person who could bring them out of the soul realm. Let me prepare. Zhang Wushuang took a deep breath. The decision was too sudden. He wasn't ready yet. Han Xian nodded. Go, but don't delay for too long. That mysterious person might not be able to wait for us. Okay. Zhang Wushuang immediately returned to the camp and organized the items he had left in the camp. Soul Crystal, Dao Artifact, Cultivation Technique. Zhang Wushuang was organizing. Suddenly, a loud horn sounded from outside the tent. That was the signal for the camp to gather. As long as they were in the barracks, they had to gather there. Once someone disobeyed, they would be severely punished. Zhang Wushuang could only put down what he was doing and rush over. Soon. In the commander's tent. Many generals were not dressed neatly and stood in the tent in a messy manner. The commander's face was solemn. Everyone, the ruler has issued a rank 10 order. Hearing this, many of the well-mannered generals gasped. Rank 10. Did I hear wrong? The martial arts temple's orders were divided into 10 levels, from low to high. The higher it was, the higher the level of the command, which meant that the command was more important. Until now, the rank 10 order had only been issued once. That was 100,000 years ago, when the martial arts temple had just seized the position of master. At that time, the martial arts temple was at its weakest. Because of this, he had issued a 10th rank order to exterminate all other hegemonic descendants within the region. Since then, there had never been a rank 10 order. Who would have thought that they would meet again today? This time, the level 10 order is to capture the fugitive Su Yu, as well as the palace master of the Greetings Palace, Han Xian, who fled to escape punishment. The commander's voice was sonorous and forceful. This order was received by all the military camps in the region. Our border was the last to receive it, so we are in an extremely disadvantageous position. It's very likely that the 2 wanted criminals have already escaped. The commander-in-chief said from above. Zhang Wushuang's mind was buzzing. Su Yu? Su Yu. The man who had always been stepping on him, stealing his emperor-killing sword and divine throne? The man that Han Xian couldn't forget? Wait a minute. How did Han Xian become a fugitive? At that moment, the commander-in-chief pasted the order scroll on the table for the generals to read. Zhang Wushuang came over to read it. The content clearly stated that Han Xian had helped the wanted criminal Su Yu to rescue many prisoners from the heavenly prison. Now she was on the run, and her whereabouts were unknown. Zhan Wushuang's body trembled as he read the scroll. He finally understood why Han Xian was dressed in a black robe. It turned out that she had helped Su Yu. And who was the mysterious man she was talking about? Zhan Wushuang finally knew. Su Yu. The Su Yu who was omnipotent in Han Xuan's eyes. Zhan Wushuang clenched his fist. He felt like he had been deceived. Could it be that after so many years, all his efforts couldn't compare to Su Yu's? Han Xian had only met Su Yu once, and she had given up everything to help him. And she even wanted to leave with him? Why? Why did this happen? As the son of destiny, he was supposed to get the Emperor's 4-piece set, but Su Yu had stolen it. Now, even the heart of the woman he loved had been stolen by Su Yu. Why was this happening? Zhan Wushuang, are you all right? The commander's eyes were sharp, and he could tell that Zhan Wushuang was not in a good mood. One of the generals laughed. He was probably shocked by the generous rewards. Speaking of which, the rewards of the level 10 order are indeed generous. Look, the master said that whoever finds Su Yu will be rewarded with the position of the Deputy Regent, Master of the Spirit Realm, and will be sent to the Holy Land to train. My goodness, the Holy Land is a place where only adults can stay. Yes, I heard that after going there once, the soul moon above one's head will be removed, and one will become the Master's confidant, and his status will skyrocket. Sigh, if only I could find Su Yu. Zhan Wushuang heard this. An evil thought appeared in his mind uncontrollably. Report Su Yu. As long as he could report Su Yu, he could escape from his current predicament and become the Martial Path Temple's confidant. He could even enter the Holy Land. No way. How would Han Xian think of me if I did that? How would I be different from a despicable person? However, as soon as this thought appeared, it grew like a mad weed. He could no longer hold it in. He stood aside. His mind was in turmoil, and all sorts of thoughts appeared. He had been a righteous man all his life, and had never done anything that went against his morals. But today he imagined Han Xuan's eager expression as she left with Su Yu. The evil thought in Zhan Wushuang's heart could no longer be suppressed. The commander said, "Each of you will lead a team of men and go look for Su Yu." After a pause, the commander looked at Zhan Wushuang and said, "You don't have to go. There are some logistics in the barracks that need to be managed. You will be in charge." He had even taken away Zhan Wushuang's chance to find Su Yu. It was obvious how miserable Zhan Wushuang's days in the barracks would be in the future. Hearing this, the justice in Zhan Wushuang's heart was completely suppressed. He needed to turn over a new leaf. He needed to turn over a new leaf at all cost. He needed to take back everything that belonged to him. I'm not going to be a general anymore. Zhan Wushuang took out his general order and slammed it on the table. This was what the commander had been hoping for. He put away the order indifferently and said, "Oh, then I won't keep you. I hope you can walk another path in the future. Someone, send General Zhan Wushuang a fast horse." In other words, he wanted Zhan Wushuang to leave as soon as possible. The crowd burst into laughter. Haha, he probably thought that the commander would ask him to stay. He really doesn't know his place. He is being targeted everywhere in the barracks, but he still doesn't know how to leave. If it were me, I would have left long ago. Waves of ridicule fell into Zhan Wushuang's ears. Chapter 27:35. He said coldly, "There's no need. I can walk by myself." His gaze swept across everyone in the military camp. He said coldly, "All of you behave yourselves." He swore. If he became successful one day, he would trample on all those who had bullied and humiliated him. Definitely. After leaving the military camp, Zhan Wushuang met up with Han Xian. "Brother Wushuang, are you ready?" Han Xian asked. Zhan Wushuang nodded tiredly. He had been too tired all these years. Han Xian stared at Zhan Wushuang's weathered face. His face, which should have belonged to a young man, now had the weariness of a middle-aged man. He must have been very tired all these years, because he had always wanted to take care of her. She had always understood Zhang Wushuang's feelings. In the past, Su Yu had been in her heart, and she had never been able to respond. But a long time ago, Zhang Wushuang had entered her heart. Humans were not plants, and they could not be emotionless. Zhang Wushuang's care and love had moved her. So, when Su Yu wanted to take her away, she thought of Zhang Wushuang. She wanted to find a safe place with Zhang Wushuang, where they could live a peaceful life. However, Zhang Wushuang was very conservative in his relationship. He had never expressed his feelings. How could Han Xian say it clearly? She would only agree when this blockhead became sensible. Just be prepared. When we reach a safe place, we can start a new life. Han Xian emphasized the word, start a new life. She hoped Zhang Wushuang could understand her deeper meaning. Unfortunately, Zhang Wushuang was absent-minded. He did not understand Han Xuan's words at all. Let's go and meet that mysterious person. Zhang Wushuang's eyes flashed. Han Xian nodded happily. Okay. Brother Wushuang will be surprised to see him. Really? Zhang Wushuang looked at Han Xuan's happy face, and his heart ached. Han Xian would probably only be this happy when she saw Su Yu. As for the surprise, Su Yu would be the one who would be surprised. The pain in his heart gave birth to more darkness. Several hours later, they arrived outside the central city. Zhang Wushuang said, Han Xian, I have deposited some money in the bank. Since we are leaving, I have to withdraw it. Do you want me to go with you? Han Xian asked. Actually, what she wanted to say was, forget about the money. However, Zhang Wushuang had painstakingly saved that money over the years. She couldn't bear to let him give up. Zhang Wushuang patted the back of her hand and said, No need. You stay here. I'll be right back. Oh, then be careful, brother unparalleled. Han Xian gazed at him affectionately. Zhang Wushuang turned around and entered the city. The moment he turned around, his gentle eyes were filled with coldness. In his heart, he silently said sorry. Han Xian, I'm sorry. I know you'll hate me, but this is for your own good. Zhang Wushuang comforted himself. He was doing it for his own good. Secondly, he wanted to get rid of Han Xuan's suspicion. He arrived at the side of the Hall of Sovereigns, where there was a place to receive mission takers. He stood in the main hall and said coldly, Find someone who can speak. There should be someone in charge of this place. The person behind the counter in front of him was just a nobody. It wasn't worth telling him about his discovery. Can I? All of a sudden, an indifferent voice came from behind Zhang Wushuang. Zhang Wushuang turned around and his expression changed. He hurriedly knelt down on one knee and said respectfully, Greetings, Sovereign. He was shocked. The Sovereign was in the Hall of Missions. The Martial Path Temple looked down at Zhang Wushuang indifferently. Speak. Don't disappoint me. He had been waiting here for news of Su Yu. However, there had been many people who had passed on false information and tried to deceive him. All of them had been killed by him. He hoped that Zhang Wushuang wouldn't disappoint him. I know where Su Yu is hiding, Zhang Wushuang said. The Martial Path Temple's pupils shrank slightly. He solemnly reminded Zhang Wushuang, Don't blame me for not telling you. Before you came, 8 people who passed on false information died in my hand. Zhang Wushuang nodded. I understand, but I really do know. The Martial Path Temple looked delighted. Lead the way. However, Zhang Wushuang still knelt on one knee. The Martial Path Temple frowned slightly and said, When Su Yu's location is confirmed, you will be rewarded. Zhang Wushuang hesitated. In addition to the reward, I hope the Sovereign can agree to another condition. Speak. Zhang Wushuang said, Sovereign, please forgive Han Xuan's sins. Her? The Martial Path Temple's eyes flashed and he nodded lightly. Sure. Only then did Zhang Wushuang make up his mind. Sovereign, please follow me secretly to avoid alerting the enemy. As far as I know, Su Yu is a very vigilant and cunning person. He might escape at the slightest sign of trouble. The Martial Path Temple agreed. His first confrontation with Su Yu ended with Su Yu's escape. To avoid suspicion, Zhan Wushuang left the Hall of Missions immediately and went outside the city. Han Xian asked curiously, "Brother Wushuang, why are you so slow?" "There are too many people waiting in line to withdraw money." Zhan Wushuang didn't dare look at Han Xian in the eyes. Han Xian trusted Zhan Wushuang unconditionally and didn't have any doubts. She smiled and said, "Let's go." When they reached a quiet place, Han Xian immediately took out her communication device and sent a message to Su Yu, asking for his location. Su Yu, who had been waiting for a long time, finally heaved a sigh of relief. He immediately sent his address to her. However, Su Yu kept an eye on her. "Han Xian has been gone for too long. To be on the safe side, I'd better be more cautious." Su Yu's heart shook. He used one thought to become real and created a fake Su Yu. His real body left the central city and observed the situation through the fake Su Yu in the distant suburbs. After half a cup of tea's time, Han Xian, who had received the message, rushed over with Zhan Wushuang. Su Yu had a complicated look in his eyes. He and Zhan Wushuang weren't enemies, but they weren't friends either. They had traveled from the Jiuzhou continent to the current 8-star civilization. They could be considered old friends. The fake Su Yu smiled at Zhan Wushuang. "I haven't seen you for many years. How have you been?" Zhan Wushuang's feelings were even more complicated. He said, "You too. You've become much stronger." "I guess I was lucky." Su Yu smiled. Han Xian smiled and said, "You should talk somewhere else. It's very dangerous here." Su Yu asked, "Han Xian, where do you want to go?" "Among the current 8-star civilizations, there aren't many places that can be considered safe. Most of the master's domains had collapsed." Han Xian looked at Zhan Wushuang, then at Su Yu. Suddenly, she plucked up her courage and said, "Brother Su Yu, if I get together with Zhan Wushuang one day, can you come and wish us well?" She didn't know if she would have the chance to invite Su Yu again. Therefore, she wanted to invite him while Su Yu was here. She also took the opportunity to speak her mind. Chapter 2736. "If I'm still alive, I'll come," Su Yu said with a smile. Su Yu was not surprised that they ended up together. He was not jealous. That was what Zhan Wushuang deserved. He had waited for a woman for so many years. No matter how difficult it had been, he had never left her. Even a stone man would have been moved. Not to mention the pure and kind Han Xian. He looked at Zhan Wushuang and said, "Congratulations." However, he realized that Zhan Wushuang's expression was not right. His face was stiff. However, it was not joy or surprise. It was a more complicated stiffness. It was more of panic and regret. Han Xian also realized that Zhan Wushuang's expression was not right. She blushed and said, "Senior brother Wushuang, you are making things difficult for me." She had finally mustered up the courage to express her feelings. However, Zhan Wushuang had such an expression. How could she accept this? Zhan Wushuang's mind was blank. Han Xian did not want to go with Su Yu. She wanted to stay with him forever? At this moment, Zhan Wushuang felt that he had made the worst decision in his life. When he came to his senses, Zhan Wushuang lowered his head in shame. "What did I do? If Han Xian knew about my betrayal, would she still marry me? Surely not." He clenched his fists and said in a low voice, "Su Yu, run away." Han Xian and Su Yu raised their eyebrows. Su Yu's eyes turned cold. He stepped back slowly. "Zhan Wushuang, what did you do?" Zhan Wushuang stood there motionlessly like a wooden man. He was ashamed to respond. He could not respond in front of Han Xian. In Han Xian's eyes, he was not that kind of person. He stole a glance at Han Xian from the corner of his eyes. What made his heart ache was, Han Xian was looking at him with a look of disbelief, surprise, and unfamiliarity. He would never forget that look. He knew that all his efforts over the years had been in vain. Han Xian would never marry someone like him. In an instant, Zhan Wushuang felt that he had lost the world. All he could see was darkness, self-blame, and regret. Senior brother, tell me this is not true. Han Xian looked at Zhan Wushuang. On her way to the military camp, she had already discovered countless wanted scrolls for her and Su Yu. However, she had never thought that Zhan Wushuang would report her and Su Yu. In her heart, Zhan Wushuang was never a sinister person. In his entire life, he had never done anything that went against his conscience. Zhan Wushuang's face stiffened, and he held onto Han Xuan's shoulders as he said, I did it to save you. You colluded with Su Yu and released the people in the great prison. Will the master let you off? Han Xuan's eyes slowly lost focus. His whole body was indescribably cold. She felt that the Zhan Wushuang in front of her was no longer the Zhan Wushuang she knew. She said in a daze, if you hadn't reported us, how would the sovereign have discovered us? You are actually doing this for yourself, right? For her, it was just an excuse to comfort himself. If he really cared about Han Xian, then he should understand that Han Xian didn't want Su Yu to be harmed. Zhan Wushuang was in pain. He shook Han Xuan's shoulder. He hoped that his figure would be reflected in those eyes that had lost focus. However, Han Xuan's eyes gradually dimmed. She could no longer focus on Zhan Wushuang's figure. Han Xian, don't be afraid. The master has already promised me that he will forgive you for your sins. Really? Zhan Wushuang said. However, Han Xian only pushed his hand away expressionlessly. She silently walked over to Su Yu's side. She grabbed onto Su Yu's arm, tears of regret flowing down her face. Su Yu, I'm sorry, she had harmed Su Yu. Su Yu had already left, but he had stayed behind to wait for her. Su Yu stroked her head, a complicated look in his eyes. It was I who harmed you. He raised his head to look at the sky. There, a mighty youth was already standing with his arms crossed. Zhan Wushuang followed his gaze and looked up. He hurriedly said, Master. The martial path temple waved his hand indifferently. Su Yu, who had transformed into a true thought, immediately turned into smoke and dissipated. He landed in the ruins below and said calmly, It seems like he is more cunning than I thought. But his gaze shifted and fell on Han Xian. His weakness is still here. Zhan Wushuang suddenly felt that something was amiss. He tried to block Han Xian like before. However, how could Zhan Wushuang stop the master? The martial path temple gently squeezed Han Xuan's neck. Zhan Wushuang's expression changed drastically. Master, you said that you would spare Han Xuan's life. He said hurriedly. Unfortunately, the martial path temple did not care about a small fry like him. The prerequisite is that we find Su Yu, the martial path temple said calmly. But we haven't found him yet. The martial path temple squeezed Han Xuan's neck and said calmly, Su Yu, I will give you 3 breaths time to come out. Otherwise, you will regret it for the rest of your life. 1. Sigh. A sigh could be heard in the ruins below. Su Yu tore through space and arrived in front of the martial path temple. From the moment the martial path temple appeared, Su Yu knew that Han Xian would end up like this. Let her go. She is just an insignificant woman, Su Yu said calmly. It did not matter whether he killed Han Xian or not. The martial path temple looked at Su Yu calmly. Where is the person you saved? Su Yu shrugged. As you can see, the place was empty. There was no one there. The martial path temple's eyes shone with murderous intent. He said, Fine, then use yourself as a replacement. Surrender or she will die. He tightened his grip on Han Xuan's neck, causing it to creak. Su Yu's eyes were fierce. Martial Path Temple, you are so powerful. Why do you need to threaten a weak woman? However, his provocation did not work on the Martial Path Temple at all. If I can use the simplest and most effective method to subdue the enemy, why should I do it? The Martial Path Temple said calmly. Kneel down and surrender. Zhan Wushuang, who was standing aside, was furious. He opened his eyes wide and roared at Su Yu, "Kneel! Kneel!" Su Yu stood where he was. He was struggling. He had experienced the same situation once before. At that time, the demon emperor had intervened and he had survived. Would there still be any chance of survival now? Moreover, he understood. Even if he surrendered, Han Xian would still die. However, Zhan Wushuang did not understand. He kept roaring and yelling. It was as if Han Xian would be saved if Su Yu knelt. Su Yu looked at him. There was no hatred in his eyes, only pity. A pity for someone who had lost their life. Zhan Wushuang had completely collapsed. Su Yu took a deep breath and said, "I will surrender. Don't hurt her." He looked around. The best time to strike was when he was about to kneel. That was the most relaxed moment for the Martial Path Temple. If he could seize the opportunity and use the Time Realm, he might be able to save Han Xian. Chapter 2737. However, just as Su Yu was about to take action, on the other hand, Han Xuan's body emitted a bloody aura. His expression was one of extreme agony. Su Yu's eyes turned grave. "Martial Principal Temple, what have you done?" Zhan Wushuang's eyes widened and he said, "Sovereign, wait a little longer." Just as Su Yu was about to surrender, he wondered what the master had done to Han Xian. Wu Dao Temple frowned slightly and said, "It wasn't me. She detonated the Dao artifact hidden in her body." Han Xuan's Dao artifact was a pill that could be kept in her stomach. Once detonated, the host would be blown to pieces from the inside out. "Han Xian, stop right now!" Su Yu shouted. Han Xian struggled with great difficulty and revealed an apologetic look. She spat out two words with great difficulty: "Goodbye." She would rather die than see Su Yu kneel down for her. Moreover, Su Yu had been implicated by her and Zhan Wushuang. No. Su Yu pounced on her, his eyes red. However, he was still a step too late. Once that Dao artifact was activated, it would immediately explode, not giving anyone any time to react. With a loud explosion, Han Xian exploded into nothingness from the inside out, leaving not even a speck of dust behind. All that was left was the echo of the explosion, echoing in the air. Su Yu was pushed back by the explosion, and his face was filled with grief. She died just like that? Come back to life. Su Yu immediately used the domain of life in an attempt to revive Han Xian. However, the explosion of the Dao artifact had destroyed everything about Han Xian. Not even a trace of her aura was left. It was impossible to bring the dead back to life. The apologetic look in Han Xuan's eyes before she died and her goodbye echoed in his mind. Su Yu felt as if his heart was being pierced by a knife. Zhan Wushuang. Su Yu raised his eyes and let out a furious roar. It was all Zhan Wushuang's fault. Yet, out of nowhere, he wanted to report Su Yu and use Su Yu's death to get what he wanted. In the end, it killed Han Xian. Zhan Wushuang stood rooted to the ground and looked at Han Xian in disbelief. His 100 years of life collapsed at this moment. His mind sank into an eternal darkness. It wasn't me. It's not my fault. Zhan Wushuang looked at his hands, unable to accept this fact. He killed the woman he loved the most? No. It's not like that. It's you. Zhan Wushuang's eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Su Yu coldly. It's you who killed Han Xian. If you hadn't appeared, would she still have died? It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Bang! The divine throne of heaven and earth, and the emperor-killing sword appeared around him. I'll kill you! Zhan Wushuang roared as he charged over with the two emperor armaments. He had completely lost his mind and was like a beast that wanted to eat people. Su Yu was furious. Zhan Wushuang, I should have turned you into ashes long ago. Su Yu gnashed his teeth in hatred. He was the one who caused Han Xuan's death, but he didn't regret it at all. This kind of person, how could this kind of person become a natural monarch? Give it back to me. Su Yu did not retreat. He turned into an afterimage and charged forward. His space domain instantly shot out, turning into an arc-shaped circle that bombarded over. Zhan Wushuang gritted his teeth and roared, "Emperor Set!" The heaven and earth divine throne was behind him, and the ferocious emperor-killing sword erupted with soaring killing intent. Destroy! The two forces fused into Zhan Wushuang's body. The sword slashed forward, emitting a mighty power comparable to a middle-stage Earth Master. Swoosh, with a sharp sound, a hole was cut open in the space domain. Zhan Wushuang charged through the opening and roared, "You're nothing more than this." However, as soon as he finished speaking, the space domain that had clearly been torn apart exploded instantly, razing the entire space nearby to the ground. Zhan Wushuang was the first to bear the brunt of the attack, and he vomited blood on the spot. The heaven and earth divine throne behind him and the emperor-killing sword in his hand were sent flying. Just as he was about to retrieve the two items, a space power flashed past. It swept away the heaven and earth divine throne and the emperor-killing sword. It then appeared in front of Suyu. The heaven and earth divine throne and the emperor-killing sword only recognized Suyu. They were extremely intelligent and immediately fled back to where they came from. However, Suyu only snorted through his nostrils. "Try and escape." One sword and one throne, they immediately stopped, not daring to move. The former emperor-killing sword had been drained of some of its Tao Rain by Suyu. As for the heaven and earth divine throne, it had been tamed by Suyu and almost destroyed. Now that it saw Suyu, how could it dare resist? Suyu gripped the emperor-killing sword and sat on the heaven and earth divine throne, looking down at Zhan Wushuang coldly. Zhan Wushuang's eyes widened. "Let go of my Emperor Set." Suyu was indifferent. "Yours? Have you forgotten who gave it to you? I'm just taking it back now." Whether it was the emperor-killing sword or the heaven and earth divine throne, they were all given to Zhan Wushuang by Suyu. Whether he admitted it or not, that was the truth. "The Emperor Set was born to be mine," Zhan Wushuang roared. He did not feel that he owed Suyu anything. Instead, he resented Suyu for taking away his things and destroying them. "Born to be." Suyu gripped the emperor-killing sword and stabbed it forward. The emperor-killing sword immediately grew infinitely long, stabbing towards Zhan Wushuang. It would only take a breath to suck Zhan Wushuang dry. However, at that moment, the Martial Path Temple strolled over. With a light tap of his foot, a powerful soul energy shocked the emperor-killing sword. The latter trembled slightly and immediately stopped its attack. "So, you are the owner of the Emperor 4-piece set." Unexpectedly, the Martial Path Temple knew about the Emperor set. He looked at Zhan Wushuang in surprise. "I almost forgot about a talent like you." He patted Zhan Wushuang's shoulder. "Stand down. You cannot die here." He looked at Suyu and asked calmly, "Do you need me to do it?" Suyu's cold gaze shifted from Zhan Wushuang to the Martial Path Temple. "You should regret what you did just now." An ice-cold aura flowed out from his body. If Zhan Wushuang was only an accomplice, the Martial Path Temple was the real culprit. "I have never regretted anything in my life," the Martial Path Temple said indifferently. "All right, I'll move my finger a little." He lifted his finger. Countless black shadows immediately appeared around Suyu. They quickly pounced forward, trying to restrain Suyu. However, Suyu had a premonition. He stomped his foot and crushed the black shadows. The Martial Path Temple's finger trembled, his eyes filled with surprise. "Yuan level Soul Realm?" He immediately understood, a hint of annoyance on his face. "That old thing actually gave you the bloodline of the Soul Master? What did Suyu give to the Death Abyss?" A sense of threat lingered in his heart. In this world, 2 Time Masters were not allowed to exist. If only one existed, it could only be him. "All right, let me see how powerful you are." The Martial Path Temple grunted angrily. Chapter 2738. Suyu stood motionless on the spot. The surging sound of the soul attack went straight to the depths of his soul. Suyu's soul was covered by a layer of the Soul Emperor robe. Under the effect of this robe, the soul attack was immediately blocked. At the same time, Su Yu's own soul formed a halo, pushing the attack out of his body. Wu Dao Temple frowned deeply. That old guy really knows how to make trouble for me. Soul gaze. A huge moon appeared in the sky, like a half-opened eye, staring coldly at Su Yu. All of a sudden, Su Yu felt as if a formless power had grabbed his soul and was trying to pull it out of his body. Even the Soul Emperor robe could not block that force. But what he knew, so did Su Yu. Soul gaze. This was one of the secret techniques passed down by the Soul Dominator. A moon also appeared above Su Yu's head. Under the moonlight, Wu Dao Temple's soul was pulled out of his body uncontrollably. Both of their souls were pulled out of their bodies. They were exposed in their soul form. In comparison, Wu Dao Temple's soul was stronger, at the level of a true master of the heavenly law, so it looked more solid. On the other hand, Su Yu was just a master of the heavenly law soul. He was slightly weak. The only similarity was that both of them were Yuan-level domains. Wu Dao Temple's face was cold. There is only one master in this world. That is me. Buzz. The sky trembled, and the moon above his head gradually changed from a hazy glow to a blood-red color. The crescent moon suddenly opened like a ball of blood. That old thing is still in my hands. Where did you get the courage to fight me with his domain? Wu Dao Temple sneered coldly. Under the illumination of the ball of blood, the world was dyed in blood. Many creatures let out painful roars. It was visible to the naked eye. Their souls, under the illumination of the blood light, were constantly being roasted and quickly evaporated. Some weaker creatures, exposed to the blood light, had their souls evaporated in no time. They were already in such a state. Not to mention Su Yu, who was close to them. He was exposed to more than 90% of the blood light. Moreover, his soul was exposed directly. Suddenly, Su Yu felt as if his whole body was burning. His soul was showing signs of energy loss. It's called the Soul Crimson Eye. Why don't you show it to me? The martial arts temple said disdainfully. I told you that no one will understand my talent. He was able to comprehend the soul shadow art that the abyss of death had never taught him with his own strength. One could imagine his talent. The soul blood eye was a great soul secret technique that he had created himself. One of a kind. Su Yu was indeed unable to use it. However, he had another elemental level domain. Time reversal, Su Yu said calmly. With him as the center, time within a 3-inch radius began to reverse. The soul power that he had lost instantly recovered. Moreover, under the continuous effect of that power, Lin Yun's body trembled violently. The blood-red light of the soul blood I couldn't do any damage to him. Yuan-level soul domain. Martial arts temple clenched his teeth. The 8 domains really shouldn't be controlled by you. With a cold snort, he took out a mirror. It was the Soul Dominator's quasi-holy artifact. Su Yu's expression changed slightly, and he tried his best to shift his gaze away from the mirror, to avoid being affected by the mirror. However, the might of a semi-sage artifact was unimaginable. The mirror waved at Su Yu. Whether he looked at the mirror or not, he would be affected by it. Su Yu's image was left in the mirror. The strange thing was that the image was alive. Come out! Martial Arts Temple bellowed. From the mirror, a soul body that looked exactly like Su Yu walked out. Whether it was temperament, appearance, or energy, even the abilities he had mastered were exactly the same. Time acceleration, Su Yu said calmly after appearing in the mirror. Instantly, Su Yu's time reversal was lifted. The blood sun in the sky harmed Su Yu's body again. Martial Arts Temple said coldly, a man's greatest enemy is himself. Let me see what else you can do. Soul Death Sound. Martial Arts Temple's expression suddenly turned serious. He weaved his hands together and began to recite the extremely obscure words of the Heavenly Book. After the words of the Heavenly Book were recited, they all turned into new pitch-black words. Wisps of aura that threatened the soul were released. This is the secret technique that I am most proud of in my life. It is a pity that I have never found a strong opponent who can rival it. Martial Arts Temple showed a trace of regret. If you can survive one of my attacks, I can look up to you. Martial Arts Temple said calmly. In his eyes, Su Yu, a small master of the soul realm, did not exist. His vision was incomparably high. Su Yu sensed danger. He shouted, "Future incarnation!" Swoosh! The future incarnation appeared. Seeing the scene in front of him, he could not help but be startled. Another me? On the ground, countless people stared at the extremely strange scene in the sky. 3 identical Su Yu appeared under the same sky at the same time. Martial Arts Temple did not care. No matter how many of you come, it is meaningless. You will all die under the soul death sound. Su Yu frowned and said, "Stop this person from performing the spell immediately." Intuition told him that the spell that was being used in actual combat was very dangerous. He must not let it succeed. The future incarnation also sensed the danger and immediately took action. However, as soon as he moved, Su Yu in the mirror performed time freeze and attacked the future incarnation. The future incarnation was frozen on the spot. He secretly performed the time realm to dissolve the domain on his body. However, it was only dissolved. The soul realm of the future incarnation and Su Yu in the mirror were almost the same. Neither of them could do anything to the other. As a result, the future incarnation could not move an inch. The feeling of fighting with myself is really refreshing. The future incarnation complained. Of all the things to cultivate, why did you cultivate the time realm? That was not all. Su Yu in the mirror raised his hand and shouted majestically, "Time reverse river!" Crash! A long river of time that traversed the world appeared in the sky. It shrouded both the future incarnation and himself. Su Yu in the mirror was using it to block them and not allow them to disturb the martial arts temple. Su Yu said coldly, "Let's join forces." Future Su Yu said, "Let's kill this imposter together." Time freeze. The two of them shouted together. 2 yuan grade time domains were unleashed at the same time, turning into an unstoppable time power. It suppressed the long river of time that was summoned, revealing Su Yu in the mirror who was hiding in it. Time deprivation. Soul destruction. 2 different yuan level time realms attacked Su Yu in the mirror. Divine 9 Dragon Cauldron. Su Yu gritted his teeth, took out the Divine 9 Dragon Cauldron, and patted it with both palms.